think the busy holiday schedule is catching up with Biden because he seemed to miss a few of his lines. Take a look at this, see if you know.
Biden care, whatever you call it, yes, it is still a thing. The other side's been trying to repeal it every year since it's existed, but will keep fighting to protect it.
Did I see something?
I think it's great. Welcome back to Morning Joe. It's Tuesday, December 19th. Jonathan Lemire and Richard Haas are still with us and join the conversation we have. Former U.S. Senator, now on NBC News, and MSNBC political analyst Claire McCaskill, and special correspondent at Vanity Fair and host of the Fast Politics podcast, Molly Jong-Fast, who has a great piece we're going to talk about this morning. But first, new polling from Monmouth University shows President Joe Biden's approval rating at the lowest point of his presidency. In the survey, just 34% of adults say they approve of his job performance, down 4% from September. 61% disapprove. Biden also receives overwhelmingly negative marks for his handling of key policy issues. 52% disapprove of how he's handled infrastructure.
Well, that really makes sense because he passed a historic bipartisan infrastructure
and was
bill.
sure to say to Republicans, I'll see you at the groundbreaking, 53% on jobs.
Which
54%.
jobs actually, again, at historic lows.
Honestly, I have to laugh.
Keep going.
54% on climate change.
And they passed the most momentous climate change legislation.
68% on inflation.
Gone down to about 3%.
And 69% on immigration.
Yeah, that's bad.
And he's working on striking a deal right now.
Well, trying to. Younger voters appear to be bailing on President Biden, and they're citing several key issues for their disappointment with the current president. NBC News spoke with voters between the ages of 18 and 34 who voted for President Biden back in 2020, but now say he has not earned their vote in next year's election. These voters cited a number of policy areas that frustrate them, including insufficient action to address climate change or Biden's inability to cancel student loan debt or codify abortion rights. But of course, it's President Biden's response to the Israel-Hamas war that may be having the biggest impact on the relationship with younger voters. 70%.
Welcome to a late edition of the Nick and CJ Show. I'm one of your hosts. I'm CJ. Nick will be joining soon. And we have Danny Haiphong tonight. I mean, we've been waiting to have Danny for a while. He is a hard man to schedule, at least when we're available. So, hold on, let me read something. Oh, that's Nick. Okay, yeah, that's fine. All right, so, CJ at night. I wish I had a fun name like Nick has. Nick at night. I don't have anything I can do play off of my name. But like I said, Danny Haiphong will be joining us. We'll be talking Israel. We'll be talking Ukraine. We'll be talking about this new thing. What is it called? The Operation Prosperity Guardian, something like that. So we'll talk about that. We'll get into some other stories. Let me actually bring it up. I'll bring up the graphic too, and then I'll get back to the first story that you see there on the screen, and that's young voters. But let me tell you, this is the graphic. Like I said, Danny Haiphong will be joining. But No Country for Old Men love the graphic. And that old man is Joe Biden. We're going to be talking about Yemen's blockade. Shout out to Yemen and the Houthi. And the Operation Prosperity Guardian. We also have Biden provides the war industry with a massive profit boom. We have footage that confirms Israel attacked homes in Israeli settlements. So we're gonna contact on the 7th of October. There's actual footage that they can't deny. And then U.S. begs Saudi Arabia to end peace deal with Yemen. Actually, no, there's one more story. Putin says Russia isn't going to war with NATO. You know how they use the fear tactic. If Ukraine loses then Russia is on to the rest of the Baltic states, to the rest of the NATO states that are surrounding Russia, which is just simply not true. And he says that explicitly. Yes. Okay. So let's get back to this story, though. And this is completely not the story I was going to start with. I was going to actually analyze a Jimmy Dore video. That's the reason why I came this early, so I can squeeze in this Jimmy Dore video, because I absolutely know we're not going to have time once we get Danny here, because it's just so much stuff to cover. But I saw this in, not this video, but actually I did. I saw this on Morning Joe late. Like, I recently just watched it like an hour ago. I usually wake up and this is the first thing I watch, but I didn't watch it until later. And when I watched it, they actually covered a New York Times Siena poll where Joe Biden is at 30. Is it New York Times? I'll get into the story, but 34%. 37% was the old new low. Now he's at 34%. So I started to Google and came up with a bunch of brand new articles. And actually, let's go to the articles first and we'll come back to the video, just so I can show you a bunch of headlines here. So let me show you a few, or not, let me show you, I think I got a 3 or 4 headlines. Oops. 3 or 4 headlines. So let me get to that one. Why is it doing that? All right, my bad, everybody. Your boy CJ is not that technologically savvy. I'm trying to get to my bookmarks. There we go. Finally on my bookmarks. All right, so let me show you some of the headlines, and I'll just go from beginning to end here. I wonder why this is not getting taken off. Can't tell if Nick is messaging me because the notification is not going away. Yeah, it's still not going away. But anyway, hang on. Let me read my notes, making sure no technical issues are going on. Okay, yeah, that's why I like that. CJ After Dark. CJ After Dark. It can sound spooky, or it can sound CJ After Dark. Maybe like a slow jam station on the radio or something like that. But anyway, back to the story. Shout out to DD. Regular here. Let's go through these headlines that I found after I saw that Morning Joe clip. I looked up some headlines. Here's the first one. This first one says, young voters prefer Palestinians and Trump, new poll shows. Now, it's just mind-boggling that a president and really a party who has really had a head start on young people, had a large margin of difference between the Republican Party or any Republican candidate. For example, I think in the election 2020, Joe Biden won young people by something like 15%, the gap between. If you look at polling now, Donald Trump is winning the youth vote. And I'll finish the subheadline. 48% of those ages 18 to 29 think Israel is intentionally killing civilians, and 55% oppose further U.S. aid to the Jewish state. And believe it or not, this is from forward.com, which is a Jewish publication that I got this article from. And I'll read a snippet from it. I have it along the right side there. The poll also shows that for the first time, young voters prefer former President Donald Trump to President Joe Biden, 49% to 48%. The Times cite the war as one explanation for the shift. Among voters ages 18 to 29, the poll found 49% think Trump would do a better job on the Israel-Palestinian conflict compared to 30% who would prefer Biden's approach. And let me just make it clear, there's not going to be much difference in the approach that Donald Trump does and Joe Biden does. There's not going to be much difference. But what Donald Trump has on Joe Biden is that Donald Trump, all you can say is he will do this. But what you can say about Joe Biden is he is doing this. It's a complete difference. One is a hypothetical, or an educated guess, maybe that's a better way of saying it. And one is actually reality that's happening right now. I forgot to say this. Hit that like button, get us to 200 likes for to start us out with. You said my mic sounds weird. Let me fix that. So I noticed with this new mic you see here that my old mic, I set the mic once and that's it. It looks like every time I stream, I have to set the mic. So I just switched the mic. So in a few seconds, you should start hearing a different quality of sound out of my mic. Hopefully you're hearing it already. Let me check the comments just to make sure. Yes, thank you, Jennifer Lynn. Yes, okay, say the mic is better. Okay, yeah, now it's switched on to this. So Jennifer says, let me read her comment. People need to decolonize their mind and exit duopoly. Trump will not be better. Absolutely not better. Absolutely not. Do I have that? No, I didn't upload it. It's a TikTok video that actually addresses this, but let's stay with the story so I can get through this before Danny gets here. This next headline, and again, I only pulled like 4 headlines. That's all the time. I literally pulled these headlines like 20 minutes before the show started. That's why I started a little bit later than I wanted to. I usually start and I play a couple of videos before the show starts, but I was literally doing this up until we started. But it says Biden's young voter problem just got even worse. And I'll read the snippet on the right side. You can see that I cut out a little bit of the article. And this is from the article. The difference is likely due to the president's handling of the conflict in Gaza, in which Biden has been a staunch ally to Israel. That's resulted in a 72% disapproval rating within the same age bracket, according to the poll. However, faced with Trump on the other side of the ballot, those voters say they may be more likely to stay home than turn up to the voting booth. So it's not that they're going to go to Trump. If you are not voting for Joe Biden because of what he's doing in Palestine and the supporting of genocide, you're not going to jump off the genocide Joe boat to jump on the genocide Trump boat. You get what I'm saying? That's not at all what you're going to do, huh? It's a reminder that comes on that I needed to mute. So let me continue with the article here. Actually, one more word on that first paragraph that I read. Now, a lot of the polls that you like when we were watching the Morning Joe clip, it showed the polls 70% disapproval to 20%. The reason in this article it says 72% is because the number is slightly lower. The age bracket is slightly lower than what they're showing in the 2 graphics. And then the other thing is, actually, let me read the second part. The dwindling poll numbers are an alarming difference for the beleaguered president who needed the support of young and minority voters to clinch his 2020 bid for the White House. Biden has voiced his own concern, reportedly marking his favorability ratings as a known issue in a closed-door White House meeting with top aides the day before Thanksgiving. And he was asking them, and this is reported, and I'm not going to bring it up, but it was reported in the same reporting that he was asking his staffers, what's going on with my poll numbers like it's not him? What's going on with my poll numbers, guys? What are you doing? That's apparently what he's been complaining about with his poll numbers. But let me read this last part. It says, so far, the conflict has killed more than 20,000 Palestinians and displaced 1.9 million people living in the Gaza Strip, roughly 90% of the population, since the war began on October 7th. And this is from the New Republic. I'll probably put all the links to these headlines in the description box a little bit later. I got two more to show you. The last one is the one we're going to cover when we go back to the video. So this works out perfectly. This one from CNN. So we had an article from Forward. We had an article from New Republic. Now we have this one from CNN, and then we got an NBC one. This from CNN. And again, these are all brand new articles. Google Biden and Google young voters. What's up, Nick? I just saw you right there.
Yeah, what's poppin', CJ?
Right on. All right. So Biden, let me just read the headline and then I'll read the details. Biden gets low marks on Israel, particularly from young voters, new polling finds. And here's a snippet from the article. Biden's overall approval rating stands at 37% among registered voters, according to the Times Siena poll, with a slightly lower 33% approving specifically of his handling of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Among voters younger than 30, his approval rating stands at 26%. Overall, that's 26% on the Israel conflict, and then it's overall, actually, that's the other way around, 26% overall, and then 20% when it comes to the Palestinian struggle. I hate calling it Israel-Palestine.
At least this article mentions how he gets low marks on Israel, because I don't know if you saw the coverage of this on CNN and MSNBC, where they would try and pretend they didn't know why this was happening. Like there was this guy who was like, "Well, this is a Biden messaging problem. You guys need to get on TikTok and make bro, there's nothing you can say on TikTok that's gonna change this." So everyone trying to pretend a different thing. Like people are still trying to pretend that it's because of Biden's age. Like people are like, "Oh, Biden's age is a problem. We gotta put Gavin Newsom, another person that would support the same genocide in." You know what I mean? Not like there's such a massive miscalculation on the Democratic Party side. And I truly believe, I said it before, I truly believe that the Republican Party is trying to do everything they can to save Democrats, fam. Like
it feels like it.
I need to find a crazy thing to say. Let me ban on the motherfucking country. We don't care. Trans people, we hate on trans people, right? We're trying to ban. And it escalated significantly. Like, and then they're like, all right, let's try to do the most craziest Israel rhetoric to try and scare them away. And people are like, nah, we're not buying this shit no more. And you're gonna see it's gonna get worse. It's gonna get worse as they get closer. The Republicans are gonna have to say more crazy shit. Nancy Pelosi's gonna email Mitch McConnell like, nigga, we need your old ass to say some crazy shit too. That's how bad Democrats get smashed. All
right, so finishing up this little snippet, it says among younger voters, I read that part right here. 19% of registered voters say both that they disapprove of Biden on the conflict and that it's because he's too supportive of Israel, raising the 45% among voters younger than 30. These are stark numbers for a president, an incumbent president who you don't want a re-election as an incumbent president to be a referendum on your presidency. That's not what you don't want that, and that's what's happening apparently. And I'm gonna end as far as the headlines with this one, and I'll get back to the video because the Morning Joe little sketch from go ahead.
There's something that we have to talk about. I don't know if you saw this because this shit just
broke.
And I apologize, bro. I don't mean to interrupt your segment or anything.
No. Go ahead. This is thrown together. This is just thrown together.
Yeah, I think this is actually very relevant because we've seen Biden tanking the polls. And now this is trending everywhere right now. This is a giant, massive news story that just broke. And there is a white hot rage in Trump world right now. CJ, I don't know if you've been seeing this, but
I haven't seen it.
I know you haven't seen it. I know how you see. Well, I know now when CJ doesn't stream, he focuses on nothing but stream for him. So I know that CJ didn't see this. I saw this like an hour ago. CJ is like,
I don't focus on nothing.
Only the stream. So I'm like, all right, CJ, I'm sorry to interrupt. I had to bring this to your attention before you get here. This is fucking crazy. Colorado Supreme Court disqualified Trump from state 2024 ballot, and they are using January 6th as the reason why. Because they say you can't have a candidate that sponsored an insurrection on the ballot. So Colorado is the first state to take this
That's
step.
not going to stand.
And the reason I bring this up, I'll give you this. The reason I bring this up because this is in direct response to the polls showing that Biden has no chance against Trump. And people ask this, and people wonder why Biden been so calm. I don't know if you saw this, the new wave of liberal stories that have been going on. Like, why is the Biden White House so calm despite these polls? It's because Biden know the strategy. Colorado first, and then you got all these other states. But sorry, see, I'm gonna get your reaction to this, bro. I almost want to show you right Twitter because I immediately look, bro. They are fucking seething. This is glorious to me. But go ahead, CJ. I want to get your reaction. I am loving the chaos that's going on right now.
Jesus, no, I didn't know this, but this actually it doesn't derail the segment because this is part of the segment in response of the poll numbers that I just went over in the segment on Morning Joe and the segment you mentioned on CNN. They have all these plans, and this is one of their plans in effect to keep this person out of the White House. And it's my opinion, Nick, there's no way this is going to stand. It hasn't been adjudicated or he hasn't been convicted. Do you understand? The charges that he has aren't even charges charging him with surrection. There's not a single charge that is charging him with surrection. It's something else, conspiracy of something else. It's not even surrection. So it hasn't been adjudicated by any court that he has committed that. This is just you guys saying, hey, this is what we believe. And who does he have in his back pocket but the Supreme Court, Nick? This will go to the Supreme Court. Obviously, this is going to go to the Supreme Court. Yeah, and this will be reversed. Absolutely, this will be reversed in my opinion.
So this is so breaking, CJ. I'm gonna show some reactions here. And my initial take on this before I show you guys some reactions. The reason why I got into foreign policy, the reason why I tell you guys foreign policy is extremely important, because if you don't follow foreign policy, you're missing like 95% of the puzzle. Like you barely know what's going on. You are being propagandized left and right. You don't even know it because you have nothing to compare it to. You don't have nothing to compare your nation to. You know what I mean? If you don't follow foreign policy, there are liberals who don't, who see this as completely normal. Do you guys know that the entire sanctions regime that we put on Venezuela, the entire thing about Nicolas Maduro being a tyrant, that was based off of him prosecuting his political opponents. You guys understand that? They didn't charge him with any unique corruption. They said that Nicolas Maduro is a unique. All right, let me say this. They got an audio plan on this time. But
I was like, wait, am I hearing something? Go ahead.
Yeah. You know how the corporate news sites are. They random audio plan. Yeah, but it wasn't any like, oh, we got Nicolas Maduro on this crime, so this is why we're gonna have sanction Venezuela. We call him a tyrant. Bernie Sanders called him a tyrant. Bernie Sanders called Nicolas Maduro a tyrant. One of the reasons why, because they said Nicolas Maduro prosecuted his political enemies. Now, let's look at what the political enemies of Nicolas Maduro went after, what they did. Oh no, one of them tried to kill him. What would happen if you tried to assassinate the president of the United States, fam? What would happen if you were caught plotting the assassination of a president? Your ass will be locked up so damn fast in this country. But they took that and they said, this is evidence that Nicolas Maduro is a tyrant, even though those people was working with a hostile foreign power. These people work with the CIA in order to do assassination on the president. So, of course, they was prosecuted. So they said Nicolas Maduro is a tyrant for that. Meanwhile, in the United States, Democrats are trying to prosecute Trump on this weak bullshit, on this obvious corrupt bullshit that is way worse than what they accuse Putin of doing to his political opponents, or what they accuse North Korea of doing to their political opponents, or what they accuse China of doing to their political opponents. Everything they accuse their enemy of doing is exactly what the Democrats are doing with Trump. Everything they accuse Trump of wanting to do is what they are currently doing to Trump. Because remember, they said Trump wants to prosecute his political enemies. Trump wants to create a one-party state. This is Democrats literally trying to go after their political enemy. The same way. So let me read some reactions. I want to give you my original take before I'll share reactions. And the reason I pulled this tab up, and we can, I really do apologize for interrupting your statement, but I really want to get your take on this before Danny get here, and because I think it's relevant because they're doing this because Biden's numbers are so fucking low. There's a reason why Democrats are not even trying to win votes. You guys understand? The reason why they're not trying to win votes is because they have the contingency plans.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it is extremely relevant to the fact that Biden saying, "Oh, sorry, I'll shut up. Let me read some takes." Let me
give you my reaction though. Because
go ahead.
I was just reading some notes. I was just reading some notes.
Yeah, go ahead.
If this stands, Nick, we're gonna see the unraveling of the United States. There's no way.
Bro, this is gonna be funny, bro.
There's no way that an election is gonna go forward with this person being off the list with his approval rating as he surges. So the people are running to him, and then as they run to him, you guys take him off the ballot, and you don't think those people are gonna go absolutely insane? And the thing is, I can't blame him, Nick. If you did that to a person that I thought the way they look at Trump, I would be the same way. I could you imagine, Nick? Let's say a Jamu, because I had to pick somebody we like. A Jamu and Margaret Kimberly, VP and president, they're running on the ticket. We're supporting them, and they go, "Oh, we took them off the ballot in Missouri. What you gonna do?" He'll be like, "What? All hell's about to break loose. We got a chance to elect somebody that we want and been wanting for a long time. All hell will break loose." So I'm curious to see this reaction. I can only imagine it. I can only imagine. I can only imagine, but
I had to resend Danny Haiphong the link. So I'll send it just now. Okay, you should have it now.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, so let's put this is Greg Price. The Colorado Supreme Court just removed Donald Trump from the ballot under the 14th Amendment, even after a lower court judge in Denver, who was a longtime Democrat donor, ruled against. Because democracy is when a handful of partisan judges prevent people from being able to vote for who they want. That's how you say democracy, CJ. And this is Glenn reacting to it. Glenn Greenwald says, as Biden collapses in the polls and as Trump rises, Democrats are going to resort to increasingly desperate and anti-democratic means to ensure Trump can't run, all while they insist that they are the only guardians of democracy. This is playing with real fire. You already know Glenn Greenwald about to do a fire segment on this, but you already know.
Yeah.
You already know. Here's our brother Nico doing great work at Hotspot. He said,
you gotta switch it, Nick. The article is still
shit.
Switch it to the
damn, I didn't have it up the whole time. Huh? Damn, my bad. Well, anyway, I'll just show you the tweet. This was Glenn's tweet that I tried to share with you guys. Glenn. Hey, listen, did he have anything else to this tweet? Yeah, nah. Sometimes you do a lot of threads. So let me show you some more reactions. And our brother Nico.
Yeah, I didn't see this at all. I
from Hotspot. Our brother Nico doing great stuff here. Once again, CJ did Brookline in the last hour. So I knew there was a good chance you probably didn't see it.
Yeah.
So
I was real focused on the shit. Yeah, I was real focused.
Yeah, I know. That's how CJ is. Yeah, that's how you supposed to do.
Yeah.
Here's Nico. I don't care if you like Trump. This is totalitarianism. Well said. Here, Laura Loomer. Bro, she's so fucking batshit, bro. But anyway, let's read her fucking comment because she's a big Trump person. Breaking: the Colorado Supreme Court had just disqualified President Trump for being on the GOP primary ballot. This is election interference. CJ, oh, bro, already seen it. You already know the Republicans about to go ham with this talking point. And they should.
I want to see what Fox is saying. I'm going to pull up Fox in the background. Oh, yeah. They going crazy on Fox. I'll pull it up in the background. Then I'll put it on the screen later.
Yeah. Oh, see, look, Alex Jones put out a video immediately, fam.
Oh, my God.
Let's watch the first minute because I don't know how much time we got. I'm very curious. Maybe I should do this maybe we should do another segment on this later.
I think Danny Haiphong. I think he will at least want to chime in on it. So it might not be that bad. For sure.
We won't spend too long on this because we can always cover it more in depth later.
Yeah.
So let me read Vivek's tweet because I want to read that before we do the Alex Jones video a little bit longer. So I'm gonna just read another tweet or so and then we watch this video a little bit. Here, Vivek. This is what an actual. Oh damn, we got a whole fucking bro. Look at this. People are pissed. Everyone about to have books about this.
Wow.
Everyone writing books on Twitter about this. They're VBAC. Motherfuckers are writing articles about this on X.
Jesus.
This is what.
Is that
VBAC.
Substack?
I can't do. I'm not good at impressions. I wish I was good at impressions so I can do one of VBAC, but I'm not good at it, so I won't try. This is what an actual attack on democracy looks like. In an un-American, unconstitutional, and unprecedented decision, a cabal of Democrat judges. Oh my God, CJ. If that is true, because I haven't been looking into that. If that is true, that they are Democrats.
No Democratic judges. It better not be, Nick. It better not be no Democratic appointed judges.
And I say that because I don't take what these people say at face value, but that definitely could be true. I'm telling you guys, if that is true, what Vivek is saying right now, that these judges are Democrats, there's going to be fucking hell to pay. Bro, you guys know how fucking openly corrupt that looks? I'm loving this, fam, because I told you, I'm a Marxist. I am rooting for chaos in the capital. That's the Marxist position. We root for chaos in the system that exposes the contradictions of the system. So when I see this shit happen, dude, this shit fucking hilarious to me. This shit is so hilarious. The capitalists about lose faith in the system. This is what we want. I don't want to get too complex with theory, but this is exactly what we want. That's why we see social democrats like, oh my God, American democracy is failing. And Mercer's like, oh my God, American democracy is failing. You know, it's a completely different thing. But anyway, let me continue the statement. I want to make sure we got time for the Alex Jones video. I definitely want to listen at least a little bit of that. Having tried every trick in the book to eliminate President Trump from running in this election, the bipartisan establishment is now deploying a new tactic to bar him from ever holding office again, the 14th Amendment. I pledged it, and once again, I'm not a big constitutionalist, but if you're like a Republican, don't you worship the Constitution and all its flaws? But anyway, let me continue. You guys, I can't help but pick at the intellectual inconsistencies. That's why I'm not a big constitutionalist, because if they are quoting Constitution. But anyway, I pledged to withdraw from the Colorado GOP primary. Damn, Vivek is right or die, fam. Damn, he's right. He said, I'm pledged to withdraw from the GOP primary. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. I'm reading this live, so I'm just now getting this news. Vivek's like, I got solidarity with Trump. Oh, dude, the backlash on this is going to be fucking hilarious, man. I pledge to withdraw from GOP primary. Let Trump is also allowed on the state ballot. And he also demands Ron DeSantis. Bro, you know this is going to be an issue, fam. This is going to be an issue that all of them ask. Do you stand in solidarity with Trump? Are you going to remove your name off the ballot? Because he's demanding that Ron DeSantis, Chris Christie, and Nikki Haley do the same thing. Wow. I'm just skimming it, right? I'm skimming the Farsighted nuggets. I think that's the most important thing. I want to get to that.
He still can win the nomination easily, even without Colorado. But and I think he can probably win, because in a general election he wasn't going to win Colorado anyway. So him not being on the ballot maybe doesn't matter. But I mean, maybe in the popular vote it might matter.
The Republicans, especially the Republican primary, wouldn't they do a mass writing campaign? Like, what's the rules on that regarding? I don't know electoral rules like that. But let's watch a little bit of Alex Jones' video. You already know
let's watch this.
He came out with a video immediately. I guess he probably was anticipating this. So let's watch this.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Democratic Party just stole the 2024 election long before the polls opened. The Supreme Court of Colorado, in a 4-3 decision, without Trump ever being convicted of January 6th or any of the other garbage, just said Trump is off the ballot in the primary, so you can't vote for him to be president. And they say other states will follow. We've seen Jack Smith and the politically motivated operations. We've seen trials in New York without juries against Trump. This is criminal activity in front of everyone. This is the oligarchy that's hijacked our country, setting up a totalitarian dictatorship in our face.
This dude is so fucking.
The Supreme Court must act quickly to overturn this, but you see the incredible pressure going on against the U.S. Supreme Court right now by the media, the attacks on Clarence Thomas and more. This is a dark day for our republic. They're making their move.
So that's the general message. I think that's good. We don't have to watch this entire analysis. That's the general message you're gonna hear. And bro, this chaos is fucking gonna be so funny to see to me.
This is why it's good. This is why it's good, Nick, to be part of the post-duopoly, because we're not pulling our hair out. Like we're having a good time laughing at these clowns and this circus that they're putting on. And join us if you're part of this red blue game. Get out of it and join us and laugh at these clowns as they do this type of work. But our guest is
here. CJ, we definitely gonna do because next time we do our show is gonna be a few days after this news, so we're gonna come together, discuss the reaction. Yes. It's gonna be hilarious. So that was just our initial breaking coverage of it, because it just Democrats are just giant hypocrites on this, especially how they talk about other world leaders like Maduro and other people. When they go after Maduro for their leaders, but they go for his political opponents. Meanwhile, they're going after their chief political opponent. Meanwhile, I'm gonna get our good friend Danny Haiphong, who does amazing foreign policy work, amazing journalist, amazing political analyst as well. Welcome to Revolutionary Blackout. Thank you for joining us once again, Danny Haiphong.
What's up, Danny?
Thanks so much for having me. Hope you can hear me, and appreciate the kind words.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And what's your initial reaction? Because this is a breaking story that I just saw about Trump being put off the ballot. And the initial reaction I had was just the rank hypocrisy about it, because that's the same thing they accuse Maduro and the people they go after for targeting political opponents. But anyway, what's your initial reaction? I know it's a breaking story. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, I mean, it seems like with Donald Trump, the political establishment just can't help themselves. They can't. Every time we've now had this will be the third election with Donald Trump, and in each one in the last 3 elections, it's been a constant. I don't even know. It's just like what it is it's a constant backfire. There's just every move that the political establishment makes, it really just serves to keep Trump around. I mean, Donald Trump is only going to gain politically from this. This only helps his image to look like the politically persecuted, which in a case like this, he actually is politically persecuted. And that's, I think, only going to give him more fuel for an election season, which is different from the one that just happened 4 years ago, where he lost, where he was the incumbent. Now Joe Biden is in that position. Biden is looking incredibly awful. I mean, the numbers, just poll after poll after poll. I think the last Monmouth poll had him well under 40% approval. It's just not going well for Joe Biden, and Donald Trump entering the scene as a politically persecuted candidate is not going to go well for Biden either. I mean, it only spells more doom for the bankrupt Democrats and the Republican Party, which really is on its own kind of form of life support. They only have Trump. Trump is their only option. And something like this, well, I think we can predict that there's going to continue to be attempts to try to prevent Donald Trump, which to me is astounding, to prevent him from trying to run at all. There's all these legal cases against him, and now this. That's only going to help Donald Trump as a political force rather than simply a candidate. But I think we can expect more of this, to be honest, because it does seem like the political establishment on both sides of the aisle is in real crisis. They don't really know what to do, and I think they're well aware that their system is falling apart.
Yeah, and social democrats are finally realizing that genocide Joe Biden is not the lesser of two evils. It only took a whole lot of genocide to get them to reach that conclusion. And Danny, I won't get you in there, and CJ, I'll let you get the next question. So, but I want to get your assessments about what's going on in Gaza. And it doesn't surprise me at all. Like, in my critique of the social democrat left and the lesser two evil ideology in the United States was that they was willing to make the devil's bargain on domestic policy, but willing to sell out the Palestinians. That was a harsh critique I had of them for quite some time. But despite that, they still justified Biden as the lesser two evil. And I'm gonna get your thoughts on that as well. But look, I want you to react to this, because now a lot of social democrats are pissed. A lot of social democrats are being radicalized because of this moment. All these Palestinian children being born. Now people are looking into his record for the first time. Now they look into his record. Now his record matters. This for the nation. I need to look who wrote this, but he says Biden's close alliance with Israel has been a lodestar of his work in foreign policy. During Israel's 1982 war with Lebanon, he went so far as to claim that women and children will be legitimate targets in Israel's campaign for greater security. That is the same war that Ronald Reagan was trying to scale back on. But I want to get your initial reaction to Biden's policies in Gaza, how the lesser two evilism ideology has been destroyed, and this headline as well. I learned this particular stain of it on this record recently. But as Ronald Reagan was horrified about what's going on in Lebanon, Joe Biden was like, more, finish them, kill all the kids. What's your initial reaction to all this, Danny, if you want to take that on?
Sure. Well, I think Joe Biden really encapsulates what Glenn Ford used to say with regard to the Democrats, that they are indeed the more effective evil. Unfortunately, there are limits, and the empire, the U.S. empire, is really running into those limits. One of those limits is that, yes, you cannot, within a matter of a few months, demonstrably support an outright genocide of the Palestinian people. That is, in fact, a limit that many people around the world have, even those who are, how should we say, wishy-washy or milquetoast liberals, people who do support the Democratic Party by any means and at all costs, those that we never really could rely on for damn near anything within the Democratic Party. Even those within that camp have a really difficult time stomaching the fact that Joe Biden is a representative, the chief representative of the Democratic Party at this time, and is no different, if not worse, than his counterparts in the Republican Party on this issue. That just by being president and by being a president that very few have respect for, I mean, Joe Biden, it's quite obvious that he is not running the show. There have been moment after moment, especially in the realm of foreign policy, the moments that we have seen where, you know, Joe Biden calls Xi Jinping a dictator right after he met with Xi Jinping at the APEC conference. When we have Antony Blinken, right, cringing, when you know that the reason why he's cringing at his statement about Xi Jinping, it's because he was supposed to not say that. And then you have just a little while after that, him literally, Antony Blinken, who, mind you, is no top diplomat, not really a skilled professional by any means. If we just control for his absolute warmongering, this is not an effective person. But we see him mouthing to Joe Biden, okay, don't say any more with regard to the Israel-Palestine issue, when he was questioned about it from the media during that press conference after the APEC summit. So we know that Joe Biden doesn't really even have the capacity to run the show as a so-called commander-in-chief should. But we also know that regardless of whether he can or he can't, he himself represents just the most vile form of a neoliberal and neoconservative foreign policy, and that he is we can't say he's more effective, because he has burst asunder the idea that he is effective. But at the same time, the only reason he is standing in this position is because the Democrats, along with their Republican counterparts, have pushed those limits to the very edge, have pushed them to the point where now, when something like October 7th happens, Israel does feel it has carte blanche to just do whatever it takes to so-called eliminate the threat, which is really the threat of Palestinian freedom, of its self-determination, of the ability for Palestinian people to determine their own destinies. That's what Israel wants to eradicate. And they see the opportunity to do that because they know, Netanyahu, all Gallant, they all know that the United States is in no position to stop them. And that's why the United States is looking this way. It's looking like, while it's supposed to have the keys to the ignition, really, it doesn't have the ability to turn it at all. It doesn't have the ability to rein anything in, because at the end of the day, the United States' position is actually much weaker than it has been in the past. And so they are very torn, from the Biden administration to really the entire political class, the foreign policy establishment. They're so torn on how they can both unconditionally support Israel while also looking as if they do not support genocide. But everything points to not only are they supporting it, not only are they actively doing it, materially doing it with weapons, aid, and what have you, but they actually believe in this. They do believe that Israel should have the right to eradicate a Palestinian state. It's just that the United States is now both in the unfortunate political and military position where it doesn't really have the control and the power to manage the situation in a way that's favorable for itself.
I have
and so
a
that's why we're
follow-up.
seeing the absolute unhinged and chaotic scene that we have when it comes to the political situation for the U.S.
I just have a quick follow-up, Danny. Do you believe, piggybacking off what you were just saying there, do you think Netanyahu is in some way purposely sort of disregarding Joe Biden because he would prefer a Republican in the White House? Like, is he going to? Because I did a segment where there a story where they're saying Netanyahu is really going to be running in his election in Israel, is going to be running against Joe Biden. That's sort of like where he's sort of, hedging how he's going to be running in the election. So I'm curious if you think both of their election, like it's funny because Joe Biden's election sort of prowess and they're opposite. Like they have to be doing opposite things in order to achieve like high favorabilities, but they're opposite. So could you speak to that part in the first question I asked, please?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Netanyahu has not had historically a very high view of U.S. politics in general, but it is quite clear that given the current leadership of Israel, but really the historic leadership of Israel, what fits best at this time is a political leadership in the United States that will unquestionably, without any, and this is I think where desperation meets opportunism. It's Israel knows that it needs to get what it wants done as soon as possible. That's why it's moving as fast as it is in terms of the civilian just massacre. They're doing that. Israel is doing that because they know that the only way they can get rid of as fast as possible any notion that Palestinian people will have a state, that they'll have their self-determination at any point in the future, is if they take this opportunity now to ensure that that is an impossibility in the future, or at least delayed for many, many, many more decades. The problem is that Joe Biden and really the political establishment, most of the foreign policy establishment in the United States, while they unconditionally support Israel, they know that given they're supposed to look like the hegemon, they're supposed to be a part of this leading this rules-based order. They play at the two-state solution as a way to give cover for their unconditional support for Israel. And that's how they want to pursue and they want the relationship to Israel. Look, they don't want a two-state solution. They don't want Palestinian people to have a state, but they want to move through in the relationship where it looks like they do, so Israel gets the proper cover that it needs. Really, this is a matter of optics in many ways in terms of the differences between what Netanyahu sees as good U.S. leadership versus bad. Joe Biden is giving Israel basically everything it needs to do something that Israel really can't achieve. Israel has actually done the opposite of what it wanted to achieve. Israel wanted to get rid of the idea of Palestinian freedom. Guess what? Now most of the world is more in favor of that than ever before. Israel wants to, gain the upper hand on the world stage. Israel is much weaker on the world stage, really, than it ever has been. Israel wanted to opportunistically exploit the U.S.'s political weaknesses. Well, it's done that, but guess what? It's at the expense of the U.S.'s own political legitimacy itself, which doesn't help Israel for the United States to look less and less politically illegitimate as well. So Netanyahu has these plans, and the political leadership in Israel believe that if they can achieve the final solution as soon as possible, then that is what is most favorable. And so Netanyahu has seen people like Donald Trump, who would never, ever utter a criticism of Israel, the GOP. They've seen them as more favorable because they're the ones who are most likely to never really mention a two-state solution. So, of course, that is going to be more liked by the Israeli political establishment. But at the end of the day, you're not going to get rid of that need for large segments. This is not partisan at all, but large segments of the foreign policy establishment is going to see the two-state solution as useful. They always have, and they will always continue to do, because the two-state solution was always a non-starter. It was not going to happen in the way that the United States or much of the political West, how they view the two-state solution. Well, Israel is legitimized fully, and oh yeah, you have this little Palestinian enclave that is also legitimized. It was never going to work like that. Israel was constantly expanding. The reason why October 7th happened is because Israel never respected the dozens and dozens of resolutions that called for return to the 67 borders, the right to return, all of these things. They never respected it, and they never were going to. And so the United States simply wants to, if it can, and the Biden administration, I think, represents this, they want to exploit the two-state solution so that there is none of this unrest, that there isn't this huge push for Palestine, while Israel doesn't this is the thing. Israel doesn't really have a strategy. Their strategy is kill everything that moves. It's really the U.S.'s Vietnam strategy in many ways. Kill everything that moves and try to eliminate the problem. Well, you can't really eliminate a problem that is regional, that is global, and that is really tied to the very existence of Palestinian people and really the very existence of self-determination and the idea that oppressed people have the right to it. You're not going to get rid of that. So Israel doesn't have a real strategy. They do hope, Netanyahu does hope, that Donald Trump would win, because Donald Trump would publicly speak more favorably. Donald Trump was huge with the Abraham Accords, was huge in trying to get the Arab monarchies to come together with Israel. He might think that would happen again. But all of that is not really contingent on Donald Trump. That's contingent on the situation that exists on the ground in this region and the world. And in my estimation, all of it is a fantasy, because regardless of what happens here, regardless of how this current escalation ends, quote unquote, it's not going to end, so to speak, but regardless of how long it takes for these active, brutal hostilities, this genocidal massacre that Israel is committing, how long it takes for that to wane, to reduce, to perhaps stop in its current form, the damage that's been done to Israel's legitimacy, to the U.S.'s legitimacy, to the political legitimacy. Netanyahu, he's a finished politician in many ways. But at the same time, we're talking about two political systems, Israel's and the United States, which is really one animal, that doesn't really have high regard for legitimacy anymore, because they have no other options but to continue to do what they're doing. And so I think we're going to see a lot of political hand-wringing attempts to, I think Netanyahu is very much going to interfere in the U.S. elections. He did it during the end of the Obama period. He went to Congress. He spoke very critically of the Obama administration, despite Obama increasing military aid to Israel to $3.8 billion over a decade. But it doesn't matter. Nothing is ever good enough for Israel. Nothing is ever good enough even for the United States, because their ultimate aim is to turn West Asia into their outpost for economic and military supremacy and political supremacy. And they can't recognize that is a pipe dream. That the more that they move forward, the more that they're going to go backward in the medium term and long term with their their legitimacy.
I think, let me know what you feel about this as well, Danny. But I think Netanyahu became a scapegoat in the United States media, because I don't know if you guys know this. And once again, I'm very interested in your point of view on this, Danny. Netanyahu is more like a moderate compared to being member of the Likud party. Look at all the media appearances you're seeing with these unhinged Likud government officials. They're stating that all Palestinians are terrorists, including the children. And I've seen this psyop, because I don't know how much you watch corporate news, Danny, but in order to cover for Biden during this PR disaster, they've been trying to pretend, and you guys see the headlines been putting up here, and I've just been putting this together like, bro, you guys see this psyop? where they try to pretend that Netanyahu and Biden is having this fight, and that Biden is upset with Netanyahu, and the problem is Netanyahu, and that's the messaging. Because I watch these people like a hawk. The messaging from liberals, the liberal Zionists. I know that oxymoron, but bear with me. Like the liberal Democrat Zionists, what they're saying is, oh, it's not Israel. They try to separate the crimes of Israel with Netanyahu. They say, oh, not Israel, Netanyahu. It kind of like the same with Russia and Putin. Instead of talking about the Russian will to protect their sovereignty from Ukraine, they pretend that, oh, it's Putin that's doing this. It's the same with Israel and Netanyahu. To protect Israel, they're pretending that Netanyahu is like this rogue leader. Morning Joe pretty much mentioned the same thing. Like, man, you had the Israelis that protested Netanyahu. They upset with Netanyahu. And I'm like, you guys see the polls that show that Israelis are upset because the government is not bombing more Palestinians? There's no criticism of Netanyahu from the left on Israel. They think he's too soft, if anything. So I want your thoughts on this, because liberals are pretending, and I'm not saying that Netanyahu is a problem. I'm not apologizing for him at all. I hope you guys understand that. But people are trying to pretend that he's the problem, but it's not, because I just found this receipt. I just pulled this up, and this is funny because this makes my point. Because Democrats believe that there's an alternative to the Likud party that will do a more gentler version of the genocide. And look at this story that backs my point up. Israel's opposition leader has a message for Democrats. They may not like it. Now, Yair Lapid, hopefully I might be mispronouncing his name. They explain how he spent his whole career, his political career, trying to get rid of Benjamin Netanyahu. But in a conversation he had with Senate Democrats, he stressed that he strongly support what Netanyahu government is doing in Gaza. So, fam, there is no left-wing opposition to the genocide in Gaza, but liberals are trying to paint at Netanyahu as the only person that's responsible for this. But Danny, anything you want to add to that before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, it's very frustrating. It's infuriating, really, to look at Netanyahu so narrowly, to look at him as some kind of new political phenomenon that is the root of the problems that exist with regard to the political project of Israel. I mean, Netanyahu, first of all, has been within Israeli politics for nearly 4 decades. It's absolutely astounding to watch liberals, the liberal establishment, try to pretend that Netanyahu isn't some kind of fixture in Israeli politics, and then to pretend that there really ever has been. No, there really hasn't ever been. I mean, some people, say that, okay, well, there have been periods where there have been more prime ministers of Israel that have been a little bit more, Rabin, I think it was his name, that he was a little more for peace. But at the same time, the only condition that has ever compelled that is when Palestinian people were in a real position of strength. And the problem here with Netanyahu is not that he's Netanyahu. It's the fact that he is a fixture of Israeli politics, that he is someone who has been literally writing. He's been of a huge key cog in how Israel projects itself, both on Palestine and its expansion for Palestine, and regionally. He's been a fixture in that. He has always set his sights on greater Israel. And this is something that doesn't really find much opposition within the Knesset. I mean, it's pretty obvious that this is the case, but this is how Democrats like to operate. This is how neoliberals like to operate. It's not that they support Palestinian people. They just don't want it to appear that their hands are also awash in blood. That is it. So they will find any way to wring their towel and rinse it as best they can, and that includes using Netanyahu as this kind of Trump-like figure. Well, Netanyahu certainly has more sympathies toward Donald Trump and toward the GOP, because he feels that they would be properly enthusiastic about Israel's onslaught. The fact of the matter is that Israel does not care who sits in the halls of Washington. They simply want full U.S. support. And the problem with having this relationship where where Israel understands, Israel is not a puppet master of the United States, but Israel fully understands that the United States needs Israel. And that means that there will never be enough support for Israel that is good enough for people like Netanyahu. So, of course, they're going to play up any rifts that ensures that it looks like, one, that, first of all, one of the key political points for Netanyahu is full, tough, hard stance on this expansionism, on this drive to supposedly eradicate the quote unquote threat, which really is just the final solution. So if that's the political ploy, then it looks really good to look like you are standing up to the United States, that it's you that is the one pushing around Joe Biden. I mean, a lot of this is politics for Netanyahu. But at the end of the day, you're right, Nick. There is no real rift, so to speak. The rift is mostly about optics. There is no worry that the United States is not going to support Israel adequately. The worry is that there is no adequate anymore. There is no limit. Israel needs to go as fast as possible. If it does not, it's going to continue on this path of no return, which means that the world situation is going to change irreparably. There is going to be no more, oh, well, maybe Israel is legitimate. The number of people that look at Israel as some kind of legitimate government that should exist in its current form is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. It's becoming only the most fanatical Zionists that exists on this world, and that's a very small amount of the global population. So with that said, it is, I think, really behooves Netanyahu to make it look like there's a rift. And also it helps the United States, it helps the Biden administration and Blinken and these guys who already see the writing on the wall that they are in big trouble. Their legitimacy is waning. They have handled this in just the most disastrous way from, you all remember the first couple of weeks of this. It was, we're all in. Let's go, Israel. We're with you. We're going to stand with you no matter what. And then only a couple days later, the damage was just it was so enormous that the entire world was looking at the United States like, you're supporting this? And so this has led to the Biden administration needing to find some way to make it look as if they have any, kind of anything to stand on in terms of moral, political legitimacy. And that has what has led to this narrative of, oh, well, there's a rift, and, oh, Blinken and Biden and, even Austin, even if they unconditionally support Israel, they support the protection of Palestinian civilians. It's insulting in many ways because that they don't. Most people know that they don't. And so that keeps this, I think this keeps this tension. It's even hard to talk about it without feeling a bit as if we're going back and forth on these contradictions. It's, well, the United States is trying to look apart, but they're actually playing this role. They're doing this, but they're saying that. And it's just quite obvious that most people now who have any semblance of humanity, any ounce of humanity in them, they see this as completely hypocritical. And it's really exposed, I think, the fact that no matter how much they talk about rifts and how much they say, oh, well, we actually want Israel to slow this thing down, most people don't believe it. And that's the problem that the United States finds itself in. And even though Israel will never show, they don't blink, they don't, they act, they get people like Gallant and Netanyahu who have absolutely, they have no horse in the race. They're not directly affected by any of this. So they go up and they talk tough. We're going to do Hezbollah. We're going to get Iran. They talk tough, but they know that this is not going well. If it were going well, then you would have had surrender from the Palestinian side. You would have had an actual ceasefire, and you would have had Israel able to talk about how they're achieving some objective out of this operation. But there is no objective. The objective is kill everything that moves, and let's hope at the end of it that this means it's all over. But guess what? Hope is nothing. Hope doesn't exist. Hope is only as good as what reality tells you. And reality says right now that this is only getting worse for Israel. The region, and I know we're going to talk about the Yemen situation, and we're going to talk about the Red Sea, but regionally, all of the resistance forces of the axis of resistance have said they're going to step up. The more that Israel climbs the escalation ladder, the more they are going to as well. And Where is world public opinion? It is firmly against Israel right now, firmly. And that is something that's been growing over the years. And now after this, I mean, there is no turning back. There's going to be no lull period where Israel can recover its image. It's going to stay here. And then once another iteration of this brutal onslaught occurs again, which it will, then it will get worse and worse. So really, we're looking at a tipping point, in my opinion. We're looking at a boiling point. Where that is, how that will look, not sure. And when it will break, it's hard to predict. But we know it's going in that direction. And the rift, it's fraudulent.
Yeah, that's going to be my next segment. We're going to talk about Biden willing to start a regional war to protect Israel genocide with Operation Prosperity Guardian, because Yemen, legitimate government ran by the Houthis. I always love their name, the Houthis. It always sounds like an insult. You know what I mean? My mama not Houthi. Your mama a Houthi. Sorry. Anyway, we're going to get to that next. We're going to get to that soon.
Yeah.
One thing I want to show you guys, and this is, Julian Assange explains like the goal that the United States have with war is to make money for the arms industry, correct? So obviously we've seen NATO experience a devastating defeat to Russia. But is it really a defeat? Because at the end of the day, the only goal of the United States, which is an arms dealer masquerading as a government, is to sell weapons. So in a way, the Ukraine war was actually kind of successful, because not only do you have the booming profits coming up in 2024, you had the Ukraine war that boosted revenue for big defense contractors. But now we got this headline because of the Gaza genocide that we are seeing. Look at this. Look from Reuters. This headline: wars raise profits. War is booming, fam. Business is good. War raises profit outlook for U.S. defense industry in 2024. Surprise, surprise. That is what Joe Biden was here to do. It doesn't matter if you serve one term or you serve two. If he loses, that's fine. The people that work for him, they're going to get cushy lobbying positions. They're going to go to private sector. They'd be good. And then you're going to get another part to do after they get in. They're going to boost their profits even more. Isn't it one hell of a grift? And I want to read the first two paragraphs, and I want to get Danny's and CJ thoughts on this. Feel free if you want to chime in on this story as well, CJ. Because the first two paragraphs of this story is hilarious. Hilarious. That show how corrupt our government is. When the Pentagon pulled the world's biggest defense contractors in a meeting to tell them to ramp up production after Russia invaded Ukraine, one of the CEOs hesitated, CJ and Danny. They said they don't want to be stuck in a warehouse full of rockets when the fighting stops. Oh, you sweet summer child. He was like, oh, I get there's a war here, business might be good, but I don't want to have a warehouse full of rockets that we're not using. Oh, you sweet summer child. Now, 2 years later, those big defense firms are singing a different tune, with several expecting strong demand in 2024 as the United States and its allies load up on expensive weaponry and munitions with an eye on what they perceive as a more aggressive actions from Russia and China. So they are using Russia and China, the boogeymen, as well as the genocide in Gaza, to celebrate the rise in stocks, because now you got people investing in more stocks with the upcoming conflicts. They show that stocks have risen around 5 to 7% between Northrop, General Dynamics, and all the weapon defense contractors. So then my last quick story, I want to get CJ in here. I know I went for a bit. So Danny, what's your initial reaction to this? Is this what we expected? Biden comes in and the weapon industry, boom, business as usual, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is how it goes. With each successive presidential administration, we see the U.S. military budget grows and grows and grows. I believe the next, we know that the Pentagon fails all of its audits. There's trillions of unexplained dollars missing. So we know that actually the U.S. military or so-called defense budget is well larger than it is on paper. But the next iteration, it will surpass $900 billion in just what we know the United States is spending on its military arsenal, and the vast majority of that is going to some form of defense contracting. So this is a massive boon for the military-industrial complex, and that's exactly what this is all about. There is a huge, some people I think overemphasize because they maybe they don't know, or they like to look away from how empire actually does have, maybe it doesn't have a strategic vision, but it does have clear-cut interests in pursuing war, regardless of profiting from it directly. But at the same time, these two things are very much connected: the war profiteering and the fact that the empire actually needs war of any form in order to expand and in order to serve those that war ultimately serves, which is, of course, the oligarchs, the capitalists, the monopolists, these forces that have grown exponentially, concentrated wealth exponentially over the years. They need war in order to continue to rake in massive profits. One of those ways is directly on war itself, is on weapons production, is on weapons contracting, military contracting. And that's what we're seeing here. And that's why there is always, whenever there is a new flashpoint, maybe a proliferation or an escalation of any conflict, whether it's Gaza, Palestine, whether it's Ukraine, no matter what we usually see is that, well, maybe the world economy is not so thrilled. The weapons contractors are very much thrilled about instability and chaos, because they know it's going to lead to, for example, Israel needing more ammunition, needing more artillery, needing more tanks, needing more, jets, whatever it is. The same goes for Ukraine. That's why they keep pushing more and more military expenditures to Ukraine. That's why the United States can't take their thumb off of the button, because they know that there are vested interests. They're even talking about, oh, maybe Ukraine can build the weapons. There's nothing realistic about that. What is realistic is that the United States' military contractors, which the vast majority are from the United States, with the exception of a few, the biggest ones, they want to see massive profits from these wars.
Yeah, and people have no idea, and I'll pass it right to you, CJ. This is my last thought. People have no idea the cycle of corruption in our government. Why do you guys think that Boeing and Raytheon advertises on MSNBC? I said this in my hotspot video. Do you guys think they're trying to sell grandma an RPG? You think they're trying to sell your Uncle Mines? No. They do that so they can get pro-war coverage and positive coverage of pro-war politicians. So that's why they shower these corporate media outlets with a ton of advertising dollars. The same money goes to politicians in this capitalist system, where whoever raises the most money wins around 97% of the time. So they buy the elections, and then they buy the media so they can get pro-war coverage and then positive attention of those candidates. And then if someone running against that pro-war candidate, the media is going to attack them and smear them. And then the politician get elected, then the politician advocate for war, which then boosts the profits of the weapon defense contractors, who have more money to then spend on more ads, to spend on more politics. You guys see how this never-ending cycle?
The cycle.
And people think this duopoly, people think this electoral politics system in this country is legitimate. That's how you get a guy who wears hoodies and the shorts, who called himself progressive, and all of a sudden he's for genocide. That will happen in the Senate races, you know what I mean? But anyway, that's my last thought. I'll pass you, CJ.
Yeah, I'm staying on Ukraine. I got a couple of things. I'm going to bring up a couple of tweets from that you put on Ukraine. But this is the first article, the first headline here. Putin says Russia is ready to talk Ukraine. This is a story just posted this morning, and I'll just read the first couple of sentences here. It says Moscow. President Vladimir Putin said on Tuesday that Russia would be prepared to talk to Ukraine, the United States, and Europe about the future of Ukraine if they wanted to, but Moscow would defend its national interests. Putin, who sent troops into Ukraine in 2022, has repeatedly said he would be prepared to talk about peace, though Western officials say he is waiting for the U.S. presidential election in November before making a genuine effort. Would you say he's waiting for that? Now, if we were to believe this reporting, would you say he's waiting to make a deal because he doesn't want to make a deal with this president who may not be there later? Or do you even buy this this sort of story or this reporting Danny, what say you about what Putin being willing to negotiate or at least begin talks about? I guess it would be, ending this war. One, had you heard about this, and what are your thoughts on if this is true?
Well, this is a talking point that's come up periodically over the course of the conflict, and especially after the scuttled peace deal of March, April 2022. It's come up periodically. Now it's coming up again as a way to change the narrative about the conflict. I know that you both have been seeing how the Western mainstream media, how the US and European, the NATO establishment, how they are now talking about this conflict differently. They're trying to portray this conflict as now in a state of freeze, as one that is characterized by stalemate. And unfortunately, we have many people who don't know what a stalemate means. Basically, that means that there is no progress on either side, and that this means that there is no winner, there is no loser, that there is simply a static situation, which, could lend itself to any number of outcomes in the future. But what it portrays, even just using the word, is it portrays a situation where Ukraine is allowed to have failed in some regards, but succeeded in others. And this is really a matter of public relations, where the US and NATO are trying to create an image of Ukraine where it was an upstart, odds beater, like a David against Goliath kind of thing, where it wasn't able to defeat Goliath, but at the very least it was able to freeze the hostilities with Goliath. And guess what? It's because we supported Ukraine so much. And this helps give room to some of the realities of, well, Ukraine isn't actually able to make any more progress. The United States and many NATO member countries are very hesitant to give more to Ukraine at this moment, given that there is no prospects for achieving the initial objective. So if we can erase the fact that this was always a war against Russia, that it was always meant to try to undermine and hopefully ensure that Russia crumbles politically, economically, and militarily, we can get rid of any notion that that was the real goal, then maybe we can salvage this conflict. We can pause it so that there can be a reorientation, not only of the military situation, but really of the entire strategic vision, the strategic goal of the United States and of NATO, which is to undermine Russia. They need time to figure out how to do that again, now that what really has happened is a strategic defeat. NATO was strategically defeated by Russia. Russia was able to curb what was a provocative proxy war against it. It solidified its economic base and even has done better than prior to the conflict in many respects economically. Militarily, it does not have the disadvantages that Ukraine has now, or NATO, or the United States, for that matter. It has manpower. It has the ability to fight this war at this level for quite a long time without sustaining any real damage politically, militarily, or economically. So what NATO actually achieved was strategic defeat for itself. And so it's trying to reorient the narrative. And one good way to do that is to make it look as if Vladimir Putin and Russia is the one that has to respond to some kind of stalemate situation. For example, with negotiations. I don't believe Russia wants to negotiate one bit right now with the United States. And I don't think it matters. And this is, I think, the hubris and the arrogance of the U.S. elite. They believe that Russia cares about who is actually in office in the United States. I don't believe that Vladimir Putin actually cares. I don't believe that if Donald Trump were to win in November, that would mean he's going to call up Donald Trump and say, hey, you want to negotiate peace? The fact is that Russia doesn't have to negotiate right now because its objectives are actually well on their way toward being met. Russia has actually neutralized, in many respects, the ability for Ukraine to join NATO. You hear it all the time now. Oh, Ukraine will eventually join NATO, but it's a little too corrupt. It's a little too That might start war with Russia. Well, guess what? That's an admission of. It means that Russia actually prevented Ukraine's eventual membership through this conflict, through its ability to essentially stand up to NATO's military prowess and expose it for what it was, which was a paper tiger. So, and the problem of the Banderites and the neo-Nazis and these forces, that has been all the well curbed in many respects. Ukraine's army is a shell of what it once was, and it's only going to get worse for them. Now there's a conscription crisis along with the weapons and ammunition and all in that entire crisis. And there's also a growing political crisis in Ukraine, which was inevitable given that it was already a poor country that's only getting poorer and that's only becoming more unstable. It's losing its literal lifeline without the United States' complete and unconditional support at a large level. A lot of Ukraine's society, civil society, its economy is going to crumble because, like most puppet states, the United States requires a huge amount of dependency on it in order to exist. And so without that aid, Ukraine's government itself, as it is currently constructed, is actually under threat of existing at all. And so that is, I think, what this story is trying to cover for. Russia and Vladimir Putin, they want to negotiate this. I mean, this is something they've been talking about since the beginning of the conflict, since before the conflict began. This is what was actually attempting to, what Russia was attempting to do in December of 2021. They tried to talk to NATO. They tried to talk to the United States, and they got the middle finger, essentially. And Russia did negotiate a peace agreement in spring of 2022, which the United States and the UK and I think Ukraine as well. A lot of people like to say, oh, well, they made Ukraine not do it. I don't believe Ukraine's leadership wanted to sign a peace agreement. I think they were just waiting for the red light, for the green light from the United States and NATO to scuttle it. So the fact is that Russia has always wanted to negotiate some kind of settlement to this. Russia has made it very clear that they're not here to expand themselves. They're not here to move further than protecting the Donbass and ensuring Crimea remains a part of Russia. That their goals are very clear and that they have nothing to do with moving this conflict beyond Ukraine or even beyond the territories which Russia committed to defending, those that Ukraine was shelling and mass murdering people of Russian descent for years and years prior to February 2022. So the reality is that Russia doesn't have to negotiate. Russia doesn't really care who's in office in the United States, but Russia does have a desire to come to a political agreement and settlement that is fair. And so if there is political leadership in the United States that is willing to do that, and in Europe as well, it's willing to do that, then Russia will certainly take it on and will negotiate, as it did during the Minsk Accords when that occurred in 2013, 14, 15. But at the same time, because of what happened to that so-called ceasefire agreement with NATO completely violating it by arming Ukraine to the teeth in order to prepare for this conflict, Russia doesn't have any reason to trust the United States or Europe right now. And until it does, it's not going to come to the table when there's nothing pressuring it to do so. The United States, mainstream media, the West and its mainstream media, they want us to believe that Russia has some reason to do this because they want us to believe that 87% of Russia's military has been taken out during this conflict. That's what U.S. intelligence wants us to believe. Yet, Putin himself, regardless of whether you think it's propaganda or not, he said, well, we have hundreds of thousands waiting to come. We have 1,500 a week joining in order to go to the front lines. And guess what? We don't have to use most of them. So the realities of war are a lot different than how the Western mainstream media want us to believe them to be. And the fact is that Russia, sure, Putin wants to negotiate, but it's not contingent on Trump or Biden or anything else other than Russia's political objectives.
Did you see on Russia TV? Is it RT? It says Russia isn't going to war with NATO, and that is from Putin. And I'm going to play it in just a second. But this is a quote. It says, U.S. leadership says that if Russia wins in Ukraine, NATO countries will be next. but why do we need NATO countries? We don't, end quote. And that's Russian President Vladimir Zelensky. Yeah, go ahead, Nick, if you're going to.
Yeah, and Putin is saying this because there's been a psyop, because there's been a fall of support in the Ukraine war, because they are having a hard time convincing European working class people who are paying more for energy, and American working class people who are struggling as well, why this issue is so important. So they've been making up unhinged conspiracy theories, and I see you smirking, Danny, because I know you've seen them as well, where they completely rewrote the goals of Russia. Because we all know that Russia is protecting their sovereignty. They don't want NATO encroachment. And that's one of the reasons why they started this war. Now, what they're saying is that Putin is on he randomly woke up one day, CJ, he snapped, and all of a sudden he decided he want to take over Europe. So now they're saying that if they don't stop Putin in Ukraine, Putin to go and take over Europe, which is very interesting because they claim that Russia is a weak country that who can't defeat Ukraine, right? So it's funny how they're fearing a country that is weak, who's losing to Ukraine based on their narrative, but at the same time, they still the idea that they're going to take over Europe. Danny, you want to chime in on CJ? I know you probably get to that clip.
I just playing a couple of clips from Danny, but I'll let him chime in on what, the quotes from Putin about him not wanting any other NATO country. What are your thoughts, or how do you reflect on that?
Well, I mean, you all say this all the time, and it's entirely true that the United States, that NATO, they're constantly projecting their own interests onto those that they target because they need global public opinion, and they especially need Western public opinion to believe that there is something scarier than them. They need that, because without that, how could NATO, how could the United States present themselves as forces for good, or forces for peace, or forces for stability, or what they name this operation with regard to Yemen, prosperity guardians, who look like they're the ones who are guarding prosperity rather than destroying it and absolutely lighting it ablaze, right? They have to look like that they're the ones who are protecting the world from someone like Putin. The problem with Putin and Russia right now is that we've had 2 years now of an open conflict, a proxy war that has taken on the character of a World War I style conflict. That's not a good thing for NATO. That wasn't a good thing. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Russia was supposed to fall apart after a couple months of sanctions, a couple of months of fighting, and Russia was supposed to be on its knees with a domestic insurgency, with people in Russia furious at Putin, furious at Russia, at the Russian government for allowing the population to become so poor and for it to live in squalor as they fight some unjust war against the plucky, downtrodden Ukrainian Nazis. Like that's how it was supposed to go. And then NATO would come in and say, "Oh, well, now we can talk to you from a position of power. Now Russia is certainly a subordinate, and now it has to talk to us about our security interests, not theirs." And so that was how the United States and how NATO envisioned this going when they made the just, I think, misguided calculation that escalating what was a kind of kinetic proxy war in Ukraine against Russia to launch it into what it became, which was really an attempt to turn a proxy war into a full frontal conflict with a superpower, with an emerging superpower. It was a huge miscalculation that has led to a 2-year period. Now we're heading into year number 2 as of this February, where it has been so obvious that Russia is not attempting to overthrow Kiev or expand the theater of war beyond the territories which were always in question, the Donbass, Crimea, etc. None of the conflict, none of the fighting has expanded beyond that defensive or offensive line, however you want to look at this conflict. And so by the Dnieper River, it hasn't moved beyond that. And it's not as if Russia doesn't have the capabilities. Russia has nuclear weapons. Russia has more nuclear weapons than the United States. Russia could try to leverage its nuclear power in order to force submission. But of course, Russia knows full well if it were to ever do such a thing, NATO is the actual one that's unhinged, and you might actually have a nuclear war on your hands because you can't trust those forces that control the levers of NATO's military branch. You just in its arsenal, you just can't trust them. So the fact is that Russia never had any interest in NATO. First of all, Russia doesn't view NATO as a legitimate political and military force in the region. It just doesn't. It doesn't have the right to do what it is doing. Its existence is completely and utterly irrelevant. It has outlived its purpose. Its purpose, which I always believe was also illegitimate, was to defend Europe from the Soviet Union. That's BS in and of itself. It was really to try to erase the influence of socialism and the socialist bloc on the entire region. It was an attempt to really cement the forces of capital and fascism in many ways in that region so that the United States would be able to grow into this superpower role and use Europe as a springboard for that. That was all what NATO was about. So that makes its purpose even more legitimate historically. But even now, if you look at post-1991, post-Soviet Union, NATO's entire reason for existing has completely been erased from relevancy, meaning that Russia does not view NATO as a legitimate force in the region. And why should it? So why should it even view the regional situation that surrounds it, and even the larger global situation, as one that includes some kind of plot against NATO? Russia wants good relations with its neighbors. Russia does not want to be in conflict with a NATO state or non-NATO state, but it certainly is not making calculations on this. Joe Biden, in a desperate attempt to get aid, this is what it really is all about. They're trying to get aid. Joe Biden said it during the presser as Congress was getting ready to reject the $60+ billion of package that included Israeli aid, and most of it was going to go to Ukraine. As they were getting ready to reject that, Joe Biden went on the mantle and said, please, please don't reject it. Putin is so bad. Putin is so bad. The problem is that we've now had 2 years that have shown Russia has not expanded the theater of conflict, and that Russia does not have any interest in fighting with NATO or even recognizing NATO as a legitimate bloc. Really, what Russia wants is good relationships with its neighbors, and it wants the ending of a long decades-long process of encirclement. That's what Russia wants to end. Yeah, that's what it wants to see end. It wants to see this creeping toward the Russian border with NATO military installations via increasing NATO membership to former Soviet republics like Estonia, like Latvia, like Lithuania. It wants to see these kind of moves end. Ukraine was a red line because Ukraine was really the last of it. I mean, there really is not much left in the Baltic region, in that region of Eastern Europe, that would protect Russia from the possibility of being fully encircled. So that's why Ukraine was the red line. And that's why Russia was so committed to ensuring that it, righted some wrongs. It was wrong to not protect the republics in a more, I think, powerful way in the 2014-15 referendums, when those republics said we want to be independent, Donetsk, Lugansk. That's when it started. It should have probably done that, and Putin has admitted that. So we made a mistake. We probably should have supported them when conditions were better. But Russia said, okay, let's play the diplomatic game. Let's look the part and actually play the part of a diplomatic country, as one that is willing to negotiate with other countries around a very important issue. They got it wrong. Russia was wrong to do that. That's where Russia was wrong. It wasn't this conflict or anything. Russia was wrong to not have trusted, to have been too trustful of those forces that have a long record of having absolutely no reason to trust them, that they are always looking to to destroy, to destabilize. they don't have any interest in respecting Russia's security interests, its sovereignty, or really the sovereignty of anyone for that matter. What they care about is what the objectives of the Ukraine conflict was: military profiteering and the larger military strategic policy of encirclement of Russia and the ultimate containment and destruction of Russia to fulfill the Wolfowitz doctrine, so to speak.
I hope the Taiwanese people don't make the same mistake of the people in Ukraine. Like you said, that they think that these people actually care about the stability of the region. They absolutely do not. I think they're smart enough. We see in the upcoming elections, we've seen them rejected recently. But anyway, that's not the story. But with the point being, I hope they're smart enough to realize that the Western governments that want them to peel away from China do not have the best interests at heart. That's not the story. I just think that you just triggered my thought on that. Let's talk about Yemen. Let's talk about the Houthis, based ass Houthis, who you guys know that Yemen is probably the only country that is doing the legally right and morally just thing right now. So according to the Genocide Convention, every country is obligated to do everything they can to stop genocide, correct? So I want you guys to understand what the Yemen government is doing. That's what it is. And I see these articles. I want to show you a few guys. I just kind of want you to react to a few of them because there's a lot of confusion about this. Let me see if I can pull this up. Then where it go? Here. I see all these fact checks. Let's see if I can find the one I saw not too long ago. Here's the fact check I saw. This is it. They changed the headline, I remember. But Yemen hasn't declared war on Israel, contrary to the online claims that the Houthi rebels. But I just want you guys to know Houthis is the Yemen government. They control 85% around the country. They control the capital. They control the key Red Sea port. So they are in control of the government. The government in Yemen had declared war on Israel. That's why you see the AP, they essentially trying to lie about that. They constantly try to delegitimize the government of Israel and the Houthis by saying that they're just Houthi rebels. But anyway, that's a whole nother point. I want to talk about this because you had BP, before we get to the Operation Prosperity Guardian. This is an example of how real resistance is tied to direct action like this. The people who are pacifists, that's a good personal decision. That's very honorable of you. If you don't believe in violence, you don't believe in action like these. But if you actually care about social change, don't listen to the pacifists. Don't listen to the establishment that they have it in their best interest to tell you not to engage in tactics that work. So as the United States and as the world freaked out regarding the action of the Yemen government led by the Houthis, it was successful because you had the Houthi that was blocking oil transits and a lot of other shipments to Israel, which led BP to pause the oil transit into the Red Sea. Now, this was not taken lightly by the West. And I want to get Dan, I want to get your analysis in here. I don't want to be too much longer. I just want to set the stage because that is what led to this. Now, you have the United States government that's also saying that another reason why they're doing this is because the United States soldiers was attacked by Houthis. You know, for illegally occupying Syria and Iraq, for example. So, but they say that's another reason. But the real reason is to support Israel as they launch the genocide. So I'll read this headline. I pass to you, Danny. I'm interested in hearing your analysis. Here's one headline. U.S. announces naval coalition to defend Red Sea shipping from the Houthi attacks. And you guys see they calling it Operation Prosperity Guardian. So I pass to you, Danny. I want to get your analysis before I continue much longer on this.
Yeah.
What's your take on this?
Well, I mean, the heroics, the courage of the Yemeni people, of course, of Ansar Allah, known as the Houthis, is enormous. I mean, these are people that have been through just the absolute most depraved conditions that have been imposed on them by the U.S.-led Saudi coalition. I mean, this is the thing. They're talking about a coalition organizing one now against Ansar Allah, against the Houthis now. The fact of the matter is that there's been a coalition for quite a long time they've been supercharging the UAE, Saudi Arabia. It was Saudi Arabia's war, the UAE very closely aligned to countries in the region, Bahrain. These countries have been so already, but that coalition basically already existed. With the interesting additions of Seychelles and just like throw everyone in there, you know, because obviously they need everything they can get because the people of Yemen are some of the most oppressed people in the world. They have been living in conditions akin to those that Palestinians in Gaza live in for many years now. That was imposed on them by the brutal Saudi invasion, which was a response. This is what's interesting. There was a years-long process of the so-called Arab Spring. In Yemen, it wasn't taken kindly to. There were mass protests. There were people who are fed up with a post-Soviet order in Yemen, so-called reunification. All that did was lead to Yemen's complete and utter dependency on the proxies of the West, basically the monarchies. And what they did was they kept Yemen in a completely just absolute decrepit place. People of Yemen were very poor, very exploited, they were just suffering mightily prior, and they stood up. They stood up during the so-called Arab Spring. But, you know, successive regimes had to be overthrown because they were all puppets of Saudi Arabia, of the United States. And it was Ansar Allah which emerged as the force of national resistance in Yemen, and they won. they won in a very protracted manner. It's so much so that it wasn't until this past year that Saudi Arabia was forced, and they were forced to come to the table with Iran and China and to actually negotiate normalization, which led to, directly after that, the first inking of a very rudimentary but significant peace agreement that essentially ended this conflict. So the fact that Ansar Allah, like hot off of this actual victory against the U.S. empire, is now being threatened by that very empire as they're taking these bold and courageous acts to stop Israel's onslaught on the Palestinian people, and to do so in a very real way, to really take the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement and actually put it into some powerful practice to make it so it has a real impact on the ability of Israel and really the entire Western world order to operate economically is, I think is something to behold indeed. But what is important here is that these threats, this idea that the United States is going to lead some renewed war drive, is completely contradictory to the position of the United States itself right now. The United States is not in a position to launch this kind of conflict. It doesn't want to. Whenever the United States is attempting to coalesce, that means that the United States is actually trying to distance itself from whatever solution needs to happen or occur in order to stop this economic warfare that the Houthis, that Ansar Allah is waging against Israel and its aligned forces. The U.S. knows it cannot afford to get into any direct conflict with any part of the axis of resistance. If it does, it's going to drag this situation out longer, and it's only going to make the United States' overall strategy to supplant and to suppress and to repress the rise of Russia and China that much harder. The United States wanted for so long, especially in the last decade, they've wanted to wash their hands of the so-called Middle East problem that they created. They've wanted to do that. They know that they can't fully do that and that they need a pretty heavy military presence. They need Israel to be heavily fortified and supported. They need the Gulf monarchies to be on their side. They need a significant contingent of these states to support U.S. policy. But they also, the United States also wanted to distance themselves. They wanted to turn West Asia and the Middle East into essentially a staging ground for what stability looks like for the empire. Basically, it's all done, folks. We're going to move on now, and we'll get to Iran by getting to these bigger powers, because there's just no way that they can fight Iran head on without causing huge ramifications for themselves. So the United States finds itself in a very difficult position here, because while the United States could tomorrow start firing missiles and killing a bunch of Ansar, guess what? Ansar Allah is powerful enough to fire back. They actually do. There are forces in the region that support them politically. Most of the region views Ansar Allah, other than, of course, those states that try to wage war against them, view them as a legitimate political leadership of Yemen. And the United States can't get into a hot conflict right now without potentially provoking Iran. And while there are a lot of forces who would love to start, the Bolton-like forces that exist across the DC Beltway, while they certainly would like to see Iran destroyed in a war, most of the foreign policy establishment across the aisle understands that to do so would be to evoke a crisis that the United States just can't handle right now, whether it's the political crisis, an economic crisis. This is a real troublesome point for the end. They don't really know what to do, which is why you have Operation Prosperity Guardian, which is basically, let's get the gang together and make empty threats while we hope I think what they're really hoping for is that Israel will actually agree to another so-called pause so that everyone can take a breath again. I think that's what the United States really hopes for, because I don't think that they believe. I just went to Vietnam with someone who has a son he's in Veterans for Peace, but he has a son who's in the Navy right now, and he was actually deployed to the Mediterranean during the first couple of weeks while we were in Vietnam, and he was very worried because he was deployed to the Mediterranean, and then he started hearing that the Houthis were lobbing missiles at them. That was worrisome for him. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of hunger and appetite for an open conflict with any force to the axis of resistance, which is why I think this is really bluster. And that if for whatever reason, like they know that they can't get the Houthis to stop, they know that Israel is not going to stop, and they feel compelled to escalate through this coalition. I mean, we're going to see a region, that's the I think the acceleration up the conflict escalation ladder, which will have ramifications well beyond. This won't be like some kind of Saudi Yemen war. This will be a regional catastrophe, because what will happen is the axis of resistance will respond. I don't know how that will what that would look like, but it would not be isolated to Yemen or to the Houthis. It just wouldn't. It can't. Israel has ensured that it's impossible for that to be the case.
Imagine you're a young, dumb, patriotic teenager in America, and you want to serve your country. Your dad served your country, your grandpa served your country, your papa served your and you like, man, I want to serve my country. I want to do good for my people. And you enlist in the military, and then they send your ass to the Red Sea to protect the genocide in a foreign country in the Middle East. Can you imagine that's how you spend your time? You want to be a patriotic soldier to this country? That's what they're asking people to do. And the reason why there's a lot of panic here, because Yemen is having a lot of success.
Yeah.
Look at this headline here. How and why Yemen's Houthi rebels are poised to seriously disrupt the global economy. And it's so bad that they got a concession. You're starting to see concessions because of the direct action that the Yemen government took. And remember, CJ, Dane, this is the kind of direct action that social democrats and liberals despise because they pacifists. They're like, oh, how dare you? You got to advocate for peace in different ways. That's what they believe. Meanwhile, Yemen got ceasefire declarations. And this is unbelievable. So I read this tweet because this is the first person I saw a report on this. So I get shout out to Ashok here. Agents of history, he called it. the Yemenis resistance expands enforcement of Red Sea blockade during. Also, I see what you're saying. During the weekend, that's when they expand the enforcement of the blockade, and then that next Monday, you had the BP that announced that they will halt transport of oil and gas, and then an hour after that, you had the British Prime Minister that's calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Well, that escalated quickly. And once again, it's not apple and oranges, right? But just think about what we can accomplish in our country. We really squeeze the financial overlords of this country. We don't got the organization for it yet, but this is why we advocate for a general strike. Take what happened overseas and apply it domestically and see what we can have. Because money is the only thing. That's the only way you can reach these psychopaths. That's the only way you can reach these psychopaths. I want to play this video. Someone did a great video kind of breaking this down. I want to play it. Let's see. I just didn't close the tab. Let me see if I find it real quick. Let me show you guys this. Damn, what the hell the video go? To show you guys the panic while I did that video up, to show you guys the panic that the United States have, and to show you how genocidal Joe Biden is, you have the United States that is willing to continue the genocide in Yemen. You know, this peace plan that the Biden administration and Democrats was bragging about, CJ? Remember how they was bragging about, we ended the war in Yemen, even though it wasn't them. It was more, if you're going to give anyone credit, it'd be more China for brokering a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, right? If you're going to give anyone credit. But after going through this whole thing where they brag about being a peacemaker, now they're saying they want more war. The United States pressures Saudi Arabia to postpone imminent peace deal with Yemen. So, CJ, think about that. Bro, if you guys think Biden is fucked in the polls now, wait till the youth figure out about this. Wait till people learn about this. Biden is willing to continue another genocide in order to continue to fund another genocide. Genocide Joe Biden. Find a girl who loves you. Find a partner who loves you, like Joe Biden loves funding genocide. And you do good. What's your initial reaction for this, Danny? As I find I don't know why I didn't receive, but do you have any reaction to this while I find that? Anything you want to add to this, Danny?
Yeah, well, the United States, empire, imperialism. I mean, this system, it thrives off of obscuring contradictions that are just totally interlocked. That you can't have one without the other. You can't have what Yemen is doing and what Ansar Allah is doing in the Red Sea without Israel's onslaught on the Palestinian people. They're just totally connected. The reason why it's happening is because they are standing in support and solidarity with the Palestinian people. Now, the United States and this so-called coalition must also recognize then, but they'll never admit this, that the only way this really stops, right? The only way that this really stops, any relief that this economic catastrophe that is rerouting some of the most important cargo that exists in the global economy across the Cape of Good Hope. Yeah, literally going around the very large African continent, contrary to most Western maps.
Yes, just throwing that in there.
To reroute it there, and also just the threat, because we know how global capitalism is a lot about risk, right? It's a lot about understanding and reacting to risks to profits. So yeah, it's a huge risk. Even if these missiles, right? There's some people all over social media. There's some people who are trying to downplay this all across the West. They're trying to, U.S. and there's nothing to worry about. Houthis are they're a weak force. They're just these, gun-toting extremists. They're nothing to worry about. The problem is that no matter how rudimentary the Ansar Allah's weapons may be, and I believe that's probably a really underestimation of their fighting prowess, skill, and also just military capacity. The fact is that any damage to these ships is enough to send, as we have seen now with BP, we've seen prominent Taiwan-based, Hong Kong-based Chinese companies. Basically everyone is scared. Everyone is scared. Nobody wants a war zone. No one wants to enter a war zone. And that was the genius of this move by Ansar Allah. They don't have to do that much. They just have to be there, and they have to provoke and intimidate. That's all they have to do. And so that alone is causing this unrest. So the United States in this so-called coalition, but really we're just talking about the United States' foreign policy establishment. They understand in private that the only way to end this is to end the onslaught that's occurring in Palestine. But they know they can't really end that, because that would mean taking a really assertive position over Israel, and that would create actual rifts in the relationship. So the United States finds itself in between a contradiction it cannot manage. Certainly the United States cannot afford, as you said, I mean, just wait. If we were to have this onslaught on Gaza coupled with a renewal of the kind of conflict that existed from 2014, 2015, basically up until 2023 in Yemen, that would be not just a PR disaster, but that would be a global catastrophe, given that these two conflicts in and of themselves would be historic in nature in terms of the human toll and the effects it would have on the global economy and really on stability as we know it regionally and globally. So the United States certainly can't manage, it can't manage Ukraine and Gaza. It can't manage those two conflicts in and of itself already, but it certainly cannot have another hot conflict in the same region that only portends a more forceful reaction from the axis of resistance, which the United States has already admitted it is very worried about having to confront. Hezbollah is pretty powerful. Iran is pretty powerful. You add in Syria, you add in Ansar Allah, you add in the Islamic resistance inside Syria, inside Iraq. You add all these forces together, and you have essentially an unbeatable force that the United States cannot manage. And certainly in the state that the United States is in politically, unsure of how it's going to move forward with its overall objective of maintaining its hegemony. This is really a very interesting moment, one that I think people are, of course, are going to underplay, because the West, the collective West, the mainstream media is going to feed garbage. The political class is going to continue to feed garbage to people, just misinformation, disinformation, lies of omission, outright lies, all of it just continue to be fed. But the real strategic problem for the United States is that it cannot handle what it is attempting to pretend that it can. And it cannot resolve contradictions by standing in the middle of them and acting like it can play a superhero for forces like Israel that at this point couldn't care less about the United States, other than whether it can get as much out of it as possible. It could care less about the United States' overall concerns about the region. Israel is only concerned about its preservation and expansion. And the United States, they know the United States has to be helpful in that regard. They have to give aid. So the United States really has a problem to confront, which is, and it won't confront it. It will be up to basically force the inertia of history, forcing this conflict to come to some kind of resolution, which is the fact that no, there is just no possible way that a conflict against Ansar Allah, a pretty powerful force, and a war on Palestinian resistance at the same time would just, it would just lead to chaos we haven't seen. And the fact that the United States is trying to pressure Saudi Arabia is rich in and of itself, because the United States' relationship with Saudi Arabia, while on the one hand very important, on the other it's probably weaker than it's ever been. I don't think the United States is really convincing Saudi Arabia to do anything. I think what's actually happening is that Saudi Arabia is trying, there's no trusting the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But what you can trust with the kingdom of Saudi Arabia is that the kingdom of Saudi Arabia cares about itself. And so it's going to leverage everything from Israel to Gaza to, Israel's government to the Palestinian situation to what's going on with Yemen. It's going to leverage everything to just, for its own benefit. And that means that the United States isn't really going to be able to drag Saudi Arabia into what would be, I think, an electrifyingly disastrous renewal of a conflict that was already disastrous for Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia lost that war. The United States lost that war. And it will lose the next one because the United States and the so-called coalition cannot afford to take it where it would have to go in order for them to not lose. The problem with the United States now is that most of its options lead to some kind of catastrophe that would be a considerable loss to some degree. There really is no victory in U.S. warfare at the moment. There can't be. The U.S. has run out of options, and it's also run out of possibilities and time to really orient itself in a way that you could find strategically useful and intelligent in respect to empire. It's the difference between Henry Kissinger of the 1970s understanding where he could put his thumb in order to maneuver like a so-called Cold War between the Soviet Union, the US, and China, versus now where the US has to kind of hold on to supremacy. There's the moments for the United States to be able to shift and maneuver its war criminality in a way that keeps it together and pushes it forward. Those days have been gone for a while.
Yeah, to your point, what does it say about the Biden administration where the Biden administration is like, hey, Saudi Arabia, come on, can you kill more kids for us in Yemen? And Saudi Arabia like, no, we don't want to kill more kids. So Saudi Arabia essentially like, no, this Biden motherfucker's crazy. Biden's crazy. So you guys see, this is what you were just talking about, Danny, just to back you up. In that article, I was saying, despite the pressure for Washington, the kingdom is continuing on the path to peace. The Saudi Arabia is like, we want peace, and Biden's like, no, you won't have peace. And Saudi's like, please. How crazy is that? Anyway, I'm gonna show you guys this. This was the receipt I lost earlier. This is a great hot spot style video where her ad is Sincerely Awa. It was a great video, not too long, so I want to play this just real quick. Oh, let me turn the audio on. Here we go.
The British Prime Minister has finally called for a ceasefire. It's about time. And he only did this because somebody in my last video pointed out that his family has closed a $1 billion deal with the BP oil company that has paused their shipments, which means they're losing billions of dollars. They literally had a $1 billion deal. Hold on. Months before the Israeli announcement, news reports in May reported on Infos, an Indian IT firm owned by Rishi Sunak's in-laws, which signed a $1.5 billion deal with BP in May. Basically, their tech firm signed a deal with this oil company, and they're all supposed to profit from billions of dollars of these shipments going through the Red Sea. But because of the Yemeni Houthis stopping these ships because of what they're doing to the Palestinian people, now everybody's losing money. And that's why the Prime Minister has come out to finally ask for a ceasefire. Now, we got France that asked for a ceasefire, Canada, and now the UK because of money. This is why we need to continue boycotting. The only language these people speak is money.
Why do you guys think we call for a general strike? Whether it's possible or not, we need to organize and attack them for the money. That is how you create social change. But I'll let the video continue. She's killing it here.
Money, 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 money. They don't care about human life. They could care less about the Palestinian lives or African lives. They don't care if Israeli military wipes out the entire of the Palestinian people. They don't care. As long as their money flows in their pocket, that's all they care. And now that the Houthis are blocking their money, that's when now they're asking for a ceasefire.
And how's it?
Isn't this insane? No regard for human life. No regard.
And how is it possible for the Houthis to be so based? How is it possible for Yemen to be so based? I try to say Yemen because they want you to say Houthi to delegitimize Yemen. So I try to stop myself from doing it. I make the mistake sometimes. For the record, better to call them Yemen. The establishment call them Houthis, and they're like the Houthi rebels because they don't want to legitimize Yemen, the Western-backed illegitimate regime that they call the state of Yemen does not represent or provide services to the people. They have no power. They're not legitimate by spirit. You got that rant. But why does Yemen go so hard? CJ, I know you want to chime in. I'll read it.
Yeah.
Why does Yemen go so hard? Look at this. Yemen says it will turn the Red Sea into a graveyard after the United States announces maritime coalition. Yemen goes so fucking hard, fam. CJ, feel free to chime in. I know you want to. Go ahead.
Yeah, the reason to speak to this, what you just said, how they're going so hard, it speaks to what we always say, what activists say about how movements should run, and that should be the most marginalized people should be at the forefront. And you know why? Because they do shit like this. This is based because they are being oppressed, so they know exactly what the fuck is going on, and they're willing to take it as far as they would take it for themselves. This is why, to me, this is so based. And another thing, they really can't do anything about this. They really don't have any. Like, there's so much in this region that the United States is kind of on pins and needles, trying to normalize Israel, trying to, the relationship with Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia just recently, squashed things with Yemen. So they really can't, they really don't want to go backwards with that. So they're really in a tough place where Yemen is doing these things, but they really don't have any sort of repercussion to do anything. And let me just say this is just about money, like the video said. Because they can go all the way around Africa, but it costs more money, and for a capitalist, they don't want any more extra labor costs, any more overhead, and this is what they're willing to kill to save money. They're willing to go to war, to go through the Suez Canal to save money. That is the nature of capitalism. Anytime like capital in a system of capitalism where capital supersedes the human life, this is the result. We have to organize to hit people in their pocketbooks, because trying to sort of play to their emotions, to their conscience, they don't have any. As Kwame Ture used to say, trying to play to a person's consciousness when they don't have a consciousness, that's not a good strategy. But go ahead, Nick or
this is my last receipt on the Yemen story. And then I know probably Danny will probably running low on time here soon. I don't know if you had another segment, TJ. This is my last thing I'm gonna share today. Once again, the Yemen people, they go hard as fuck. They go hard. This is the spokesperson of the Yemen's armed forces, essentially saying these motherfuckers been trying us for years. Nigga, we been want the phone. We been want the phone. That's essentially what he's saying here. I don't think it's English translated, so I guess I gotta read a little bit of it. Let me turn down. And I'll read out for people only listening. He said, if you look at the crimes being committed in Gaza, they're similar to the one that were committed against us in the past 9 years. That were committed against us. Bombarding hospitals, they bombarded our hospitals. Bombarded markets, they bombarded our markets. They bombarded our schools. Bombarding roads, people are while they're silently sleeping at home. Just like it happened to us. It's the same aggressor. The same American bombs being poured on Gaza were the same ones being poured on us in Yemen. The aggressor is one. The aggressor is one. The leader of it is one. America. The one who led the aggressor in Yemen is the same one who's leading it in Palestine. Majority were saying, strike Israel, we dared you. We struck them. They said, seize a ship, we dare you. We seized one and took it to our port, and I don't know how to say that, Hodeidah. It greatly honors us that we mobilized against the enemy, that we are confronting the Zionist enemy who is aggressing on Palestine and their homeland. We will continue to confront the American-Israeli enemy until the aggression on Gaza stops. As for the battle in our homeland, we are, God willing, fully prepared and ready for anything from the enemy. If Saudi and the Emirates even think about leading an aggression on us, commanded by Israel and the United States, we are present and ready. They tried us for 9 years, and they want to do it again. We are here, and we are ready. They go too hard, fam. So that was the last thing I want to share. Danny, any final thoughts on the Yemenis resistance and the operation?
I got more on Israel I want to ask before we let Danny go. But after he answered this question,
Sure.
Yeah, feel free, CJ. Feel free.
No, I mean, yeah, I think on the particular point, I mean, all of that just shows where, you know, Ansar Allah, where Yemen is, they do truly see their struggles as one. I mean, they're looking at this not from a lot of times the resistance in the region now gets pinned as a struggle around almost like religious solidarity. Like, okay, these are forces that ascribe to a particular form of Islam, right? Shia or whatever, what have you. But the truth is that how Yemen and how Ansar Allah views this, they stated it. They view it as a common struggle that harkens back to the period of Arab nationalism and ultimately the movement for self-determination in the region that included both, of course, the Arab nationalist movement, but really it was a broader independence movement after the crumbling of Sykes-Picot and the emergence of the United States as the superpower. During that period, like much of the world, West Asia also had its own form of independence movements that led to pan-Arabism, and it led to a number of countries aligning. I mean, there's a reason why all those flags look the same. And, you know, all these Zionists try to say, Palestine is Jordan. Look at the flags. They're the same. It's like, well, no, that's not true. But at the same time, there once was, and the CIA and the United States had a huge hand in breaking this up and dividing it. There was a massive movement all across the region to destroy the colonial borders and to unify people across national, political, and religious lines. That it was not, okay, well, you have Muslim Islam on the one hand, you have Arabism on the other. No, there was a movement of nationalism that took various forms. And that's what the United States, when it became the superpower, attempted to destroy by supporting regimes like the ones that invaded Yemen, and of course Israel. So what's happening here is kind of a reemergence of that. The axis of resistance is the modern day form of that resistance that has existed all along, and it's something that the United States is never going to be able to get rid of, and the United States understands this, and that's why there is panic. A lot of people have been, you know, adding me and mentioning me all over Twitter when I talk about this, because whenever I use the word panic, it almost triggers Zionists, and it triggers these kind of hawkish, whatever it's NATO, whoever it is, they get triggered by this because they don't want to hear that those that they worship so dearly, you know, that align so well with their own thirst for war, that they're not in the position that they fantasize about. They're not in the, oh, well, we rule the world and no one has any say into this. And that if anyone has a say in this or tries to assert their say, that they're all just going to be eradicated. Those days are gone. What's happening to Palestine, this really is, I think, one of the most difficult parts about what's happening to Palestinians in Palestine is that it's a reminder of what was supposed to be a bygone era. It was supposed to be settler colonialism. We know that it's not gone. We know that it's very much implanted in much of the West, including the United States. But it was supposed to be gone in terms of this form that Israel takes. And Israel has basically ripped off all of the ability to mask that. And the strengthening of the axis of resistance is only going to accelerate that process, which then puts the United States in a very difficult position. It needs to support Israel. It needs Israel to continue to act in this way and to play this role for it, because the United States can't come in and act like it has some kind of global Monroe Doctrine anymore. most of the region. There's a reason why the United States doesn't have the same position it had in Iraq. There's a reason why the United States couldn't succeed in Syria. There's a reason why the United States can't overthrow or even undermine the Iranian government despite starvation sanctions. There's a reason why the United States can't control the political situation in Yemen. I mean, there's huge reasons why Lebanon, Hezbollah has such a huge influence and role and is basically the leadership of Lebanon in many ways. There's a reason why these forces are intractable. They can't be gotten rid of. It's because the United States is just not as powerful as it once was. And just everything that's gone on with Yemen since the rise of the Ansar Allah movement, since the so-called rebels, which really are a force of national liberation, since they emerged and took power, that was really most people don't say this, but it's, or even connected to this, that was really basically a victory over the post-Soviet attempt for the United States to rule this region without any questions asked, that it was the dominant force. When Yemen won that war against Saudi Arabia, that was, and when when these forces took power, that was basically the death knell of that order. And it's only going to continue to happen across the region as the United States just doesn't have the ability to control its its partner in crime, Israel. It doesn't have the ability to control it. And I think we're going to see, as we just reviewed here, a pretty significant. I suspect that these concessions that the West, these attempts to build a case for maybe a pause in the fighting again, I think that's going to get stronger, because I don't think this coalition is going to have any teeth to it. I think they're really going to have to, if they want the economic situation to stabilize, they're going to have to assert some pressure over Israel. Whether it works or not, we don't know.
Yeah, we're staying on Israel. I want to get a couple of more reaction on a couple of things, and then I also want to look at Israel through the lens. I'm sorry, Israel Palestine through the lens of domestic politics. So just kind of talked about RFK Jr.'s kind of view. I just want to get your sort of a reaction to that. But first, let me bring up this first headline and stand on this Yemen. Stand on Israel. This is from the Cradle. Video confirms tank struck home with Israeli captives on October 7th. The evidence continues to grow that many Israelis killed during Hamas' 7th attack were killed by Israeli forces. And I forget the death toll.
It's like under 600 now.
Yeah, I know they've revised it under like 900 or 800 or something like that. So it just keeps going down, which is just, how did they have the top number in the first place? Like, where did you get 1,500 if you're able to eliminate more than half of that? Like, where are you?
One of the reasons they lied about it because
go ahead.
One of the reasons they lied about it because it would have revealed the fact that Hamas was targeting many military members, because they had to lower the count because they had to take around military members who died. And if they don't lie about that, then you had to say, oh, Hamas committed a successful military operation, which it did. So they had to lie and say, oh, well, they just went and slaughtered a bunch of innocent people. No, they targeted a military facility. It was a successful military operation that embarrassed Israel. But sorry, go ahead, CJ.
Yeah, I'm going to read just a little bit more, and then I'm going to actually show you the actual video. Video from a police helicopter shows that an Israeli tank opened fire on a house where 13 Palestinian captors were killed during Hamas' October 7th attack on military bases and settlements surrounding besieged Gaza. Israel's 12 News reported. Now, you know how their logic, this Zionist logic, is that, yes, I pulled the trigger, but it's Hamas' fault. You get what I'm saying? That's sort of like, it feels like where they're getting this, where Hamas did this murder of 1,500. Yeah, the bullets came from our tanks, but it's Hamas' fault. They made us sort of do it. And I'll read one more part here, and that's right here. The house right here owned the house owned by Pasa Cohen is located in Kibbutz Be'eri, I think that's how you say it, which Hamas attacked in an effort to take Israeli captives back to Gaza. The killing of 13 captives by Israeli tanks fire was already known due to the testimony from 44-year-old Yasmin Barat. And that's where now I'm going to bring the video up. And this is Dan Cohen. Shout out to Dan Cohen. He's a awesome reporter we've had on many times, but he's the one where I saw this this next receipt I'm going to show you right here. Here's the video, but he's the one that I got it from. He also has the video of the testimony of the woman they just mentioned, Yasmin. I'll show you that video. If we have time, I'll show you that video also. But let's watch this. It's very short. It's only 30 seconds. There's no sound, but it'll show some tanks, it'll show some houses, a neighborhood, and you'll see some gunfire or some fire. Right there in the red circle, you'll start to see some fire in just a second. Right there is one gunshot. You see the smoke. That's the remnants of it. Amazing. I wonder how they got that helicopter footage, but I'll let both of you chime in before I show the next receipt. Danny, what was your reaction after seeing actually seeing the footage? Are you at all surprised by the death toll going down, and we're finding out more and more that there's more soldiers that were killed versus than we thought? What say you about all of that?
No, I'm not so surprised. I mean, I believed from the beginning, I was very conflicted in this because on the one hand, it certainly gives a lot of leeway for Zionists, the pro-Israel camp, to lend legitimacy to their campaign of onslaught. And this is I think the utterly racist dynamics of this, that if you can evoke legitimate crime, if you can lambast and label and foist upon legitimate crimes of humanity against humanity onto, let's say, Hamas, by saying, oh, well, they killed this many people, right? Like, oh, look at the rave and all of this. If you can look at these it was from the very beginning, we were seeing all the atrocity propaganda. If you can put a number to that, then that can give some support to Israel's crimes. However, for anyone that understands the reality of the situation with regard to Palestine vis-a-vis Israel, the Palestinian people absolutely have every right to defend themselves however they want, and they have every right to assert their right to self-determination through armed struggle. And the situation is, it's a conflict. That's why we constantly call it the Israel-Palestine conflict. Given that it is a conflict, it's not resolved. There is no peace. There is no true settlement. There is no UN resolution that's really been abided by. Then that means, in war, bad things happen. But at the same time, given that if anyone had a thinking brain about this and thought, is it in the best interest for Al-Qassam brigades to go into quote unquote Israeli occupied territory and just start killing civilians, right? Or so-called civilians, settlers, maybe settlers outside of the military ranks. Is that within their interest? Does that make any sense? Why would that make sense? What would Al-Qassam get out of that besides maybe some catharsis? Is resistance really fought on the basis of catharsis? Sure. You can read Frantz Fanon's A Dying Colonialism, and he talks about the Algerian revolutionaries and the NLF, the National Liberation Front of Algeria. Oh yeah, certain people indulge in some things that maybe didn't need to happen, right? Because they were in a state of war, and there were more than a few people that did want revenge against the French colonialists. However, it was always likely that Israel was inflating the numbers because Israel has a proven track record of lying. They lie all the time. Israel is an outgrowth of U.S. and Western foreign policy, which is literally built on lies. And Israel has followed that to the deed. Israel really doesn't know. Facts matter very little to Israel. That's why anyone who really supports Israel never talks in facts. They don't talk about the realities of the conflict. They talk in terms of whatever narrative will project some kind of version of their superiority. That's how they talk. They can't talk in any other way. They have to dehumanize, and that in order to make themselves look superior. So this was, it was always likely that it was overblown, but even early, several early in this onslaught, it was, the names were released, right, of all the people that were killed. Most of them were in the military. Most of them were actively in the military. Then you have all this footage that you just showed, and there's been other footage that shows, oh, wow, that Hannibal directive, that's like a real thing. They're just killing people. Israel is literally shooting everything that moves, and it's literally part of their military doctrine, because their doctrine is not predicated on protecting settlers. Their doctrine is predicated on preserving and expanding Israel. Settlers, you can get those anywhere. You can pick them out of Europe. You can pluck them out of the UK. You can get them out of France. You can get them out of the United States. There's a lot of potential settlers. Hell, there's college campuses everywhere that have that advertise birthright and all this stuff. There's a constant stream of cultivation of potential new settlers, right? How can they create more Zionist Jews? That's been a project of Israel for many, many, many decades, really since its inception. So they don't care about the kibbutzes, the people who live there. It's not, if there is a possibility to destroy Palestine's resistance and its possibility in any point in the future to have self-determination, Israel is going to take that opportunity. And that's what they did. And they killed a lot of so-called Israelis with that. And I think we're going to find that Israel killed most of them. I think that's what we're going to find. And then everyone else that was killed. Yeah, and everyone else that was killed by act. I mean, here's the thing. You have a situation where Israel was literally shooting everything that moves, and you had Al-Qassam brigades that were trying to fire back. We will never going to be able to trace where these bullets, where the ammunition, where that went. We're not going to be able to do that. And for the most part, the reason for that is because Israel literally burned everything. They burned everything. They incinerated all of these so-called conflict zones that were where the engagement was happening. So on October 7th. So that I think this is really the great unraveling, because Israel had to even themselves reduce the number of people. And now we're seeing them have to admit that they're killing their own so-called hostages, their own prisoners of war. And Ali Abouima had a really hilarious he does these voiceovers imitating Israelis, prominent Israelis, and he was talking about how the babies had bombs in them, the babies had weapons. We're finding these Palestinian children, babies that were just killed execution style. Oh, they had bombs in them, they had weapons. This is how desperate it's becoming. Like that Hamas, Al-Qassam, they're wrapping up bombs into like baby swaddles and all this nonsense. That's how desperate the narrative is becoming, because yeah, there is a drive, and I believe that this footage that we're seeing, it's being leaked out. Scott Ritter talks about this. Al-Qassam has a lot of data that they were able to take during that operation, And also, you likely have, well, you probably have a lot of fervent, let's defend Israel to the last whatever drop of blood. You also probably have a lot of people who are, while they may not be pro-Palestinian, I don't know if they want to be on the other side of a RPG or or any other way. They don't really want to be fighting guerrilla war. That's a tough thing to do. And there's plenty of historical precedent for why you're going to get murked in a guerrilla war. It's happening right now, and you're just are, because you don't have the motivation, you don't have the passion, you don't know where you are. You tried to level everything. They tried to do that in Vietnam. Agent Orange was not just about poisoning people, which was one part of it. The big part was trying to level all of the foliage, everything, level it. You poison all the agriculture, you poison the jungles, the trees, everything. You get rid of it so you can see people. Now, the National Liberation Forces, they can't hide. Oh, too bad. You had the Coochie tunnels, which were like 150 miles long. They were still hiding. They were still able to. It didn't matter. You could try to drop, you can try to drop poison on people and try to destroy everything in the way. It doesn't matter. People find a way to resist. Palestinians have found a way. And that's why this whole idea of eradicating Hamas and, oh no, like, we are going to achieve this objective. And guess what? We can kill anything that moves and that will do it. It's just it's an utter it's just an utterly desperate and completely mythical fantasy to think that way, but that's all they got.
And one of the tweets that I saw from you, I'm going to cover a couple of your tweets right now, is this is one of them. I don't need to play the video, but you put the quote here. Vladimir Putin says the Gaza Strip is now the largest children's cemetery in the world. I'm very I don't know how to read what Putin says about Palestine because of the relationship they have with Israel. So when he says the Gaza Strip is now the largest cemetery in the world, what is he? How does that reflect on Israel? And because I believe is either an ally or they have a very good relationship between Israel and Russia. So that to me is a very sort of curious thing. But I want to. Oh, actually, it's in a different screen. Let me share a different screen because I found this other thing. This is something else she posted. And then I'm going to ask you about some domestic stuff here. But this is one thing you posted right here, which is Israel is destroying entire neighborhoods in Gaza. This is barbarism. Now, this, like, these bombs that they're using to destroy entire neighborhoods, these are bombs that are being funded and or sent directly from the United States, especially like munitions, because that's what the Israel wants the most from the United States. And they said munitions. What I'm trying to say this without getting YouTube, so I'm trying to say this without seeming like I'm advocating for something. But when Palestinians see something like this, when you are in, like, this is your land, like this is where you're from, and you see them wiping out entire sort of neighborhoods, I know what I would do in reaction of some of this. But how do you view Hamas overall? How do you view Hamas and what they're doing, Danny?
There's a lot to address there, and I also want to talk. Maybe I can close here on the Russia-Israel relationship. But in terms of Hamas, I mean, I think there's a contradiction that I think we can talk about, right? We can talk about how Israel and the United States did. I don't think that they created Hamas. I think there's people who think that they created Hamas. I don't think that's what happened. They did elevate Hamas, especially during the Bush era, the Bush II era. where there is a huge need to basically break the back of the Palestinian resistance as a unified body, as a potentially unifying body. It was already crumbling, but the United States and Israel have a policy that is well documented now, especially in the aftermath of the 21st century, of supporting whatever elements they can within various countries in order to, and usually that takes the form of some kind of so-called radical jihadism, Al-Qaeda, these kind of forces. I don't believe that Hamas was ever there, but it is an outgrowth of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a CIA byproduct. So Hamas does have that relationship, and it has had pretty deep contradictions politically and conflicts even with the axis of resistance. It did send fighters into Syria to fight the government of Syria, and has had frosty relations with various elements of the axis of resistance. But at the same time, Hamas, just like anything else, has changed quite a lot over the years. And because it was through the aid of Qatar and through the United States and Israel wanting kind of like this legitimate Islamic force to lead Gaza, as opposed to the leadership of the Palestinian Authority, which itself is bankrupt, because they wanted that divide. What happened was Hamas was legitimized. It became a legitimate. It was already a legitimate party, but now it's a recognized political party regionally and globally. And that has meant that Hamas, like any other political party, has to respond to the conditions in front of it. It has had to moderate itself and change its politics on the axis of resistance, because guess what? The axis of resistance it's really its only friend. I mean, when it comes to these other forces, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, not their friend, right? So Hamas has had to, for example, repair its relationship with Syria. It's had to do that. It's had to become closer with the entire region that supports the Palestinian cause, because it really is the most powerful and most organized force in Gaza for the Palestinian cause. So my view on Hamas is that it is a political outgrowth of surely forces that Israel and the United States attempted to exploit, but they have not been able to do so with Hamas in the way that they would like. Some people posited that what happened on October 7th might have been a false flag. I don't believe that for a second. I believe that there is a more unified Palestinian resistance that made a calculated decision that this was the time to strike, given that there was a need to push global public opinion back toward the Palestinian side, and to end certain developments like Israel's growing legitimacy with the more corruptible Arab states, the monarchies, Saudi Arabia, sorry. These forces were attempting to normalize their relations with Israel, and that, in effect, would isolate the axis of resistance, and it would isolate the Palestinian cause, maybe to the point of no return. So I believe that was the principal objective. It was also there were some religious significance to this as well, so, with regard to Islam and the protection of Al-Quds. I think there's a lot of different forces that push, that influence Hamas. But at the end of the day, my view on Hamas is that it is a legitimate organization of resistance. It may not be the one we all love all of the time and that we all support all of the time, and we can acknowledge its roots. But we also, I think, have to acknowledge that Palestinian resistance is also operating independently of whatever faction of within Al-Qassam, within Hamas, that we may not like. Its roots in the past, that a lot has changed over the course of many, many, many years. And I think we have to acknowledge that. But I just want to close on the Russia-Israel relationship, because I think that's a very it's a sticking point. A lot of people ask me both about Russia, Israel, and China, Israel. With regard to Russia and Israel, this was, I mean, this dates back to the Soviet period. There are developments, right? There's like the historical inertia, the contradictions of history. Sometimes I think we have to understand this, is that most of the time, if not all of the time, the force of material change is always going to be far ahead of where people sit ideologically. Like that's why most movements, most resistance movements, most liberation movements, they start off small and grow larger, and they tend to not have vast, sometimes they don't even have vast majorities of people in any particular context, because first, one, you don't really need a majority of people, and two, the process of winning people over is much slower than the changes that occur just objectively in any given situation, development situation. We're talking about the science of economy and politics. That's just always true. So when it comes to the Soviet Union, right, the Soviet Union, because of historical inertia, because of all of the pressures and the politics and that came around the formation of Israel, actually was one of the first countries to acknowledge Israel's existence. And that was because there was this huge movement, the Zionist movement, but also the West in general, wanted to legitimize Israel and exploit the Holocaust in order to do that. So the Soviet Union was one of the first countries. It was a socialist country, but it was one of the first countries to acknowledge its existence. And it had a lot of reasons to do that militarily, politically, that moved beyond ideological affiliations and disposition. And the same goes now for Russia. Russia, post-Soviet Union, a lot of complicated things happened after the fall of the Soviet Union. One of them was a lot of Russians, especially oligarchs, they wanted a close relationship with Israel because some of them were Jewish, and they wanted to live in Israel and have property and settle, like what's been going on with most most parts of the world where there might be Zionists and reactionaries, and they want to, they want to use they might be Jewish and they want to use their capital and clout to take advantage of the situation in Israel. So so there is this difficult situation for Russia as a whole, where Russia wants to follow international law to the book on this issue, because one, it benefits Russia to have a stable region. Mm-hmm. It benefits Russia to actually do diplomacy on this issue. There's no reason for Russia to actively support Israel's onslaught or to go 100% in the camp of Palestine, because if it went 100% in the camp of Palestine, then the aggression toward itself with the United States and, of course, its NATO vassals, that would accelerate, right? You go too far against Israel, you stand to pay consequences for that. So Russia has attempted to do what I think just makes sense, which is to, on the one hand, voice and assert pressure, right? Russia was one of the first countries, I think it was the first country, to put forward a resolution for a legitimate ceasefire. That was rejected by the United States. And it's attempting to play a role of mediator, of one where it can gain stability. Because yes, Russia has for many, many years, dating back to the Soviet period, has had a relationship economically and politically with Israel. And also stability and things like that really matter to Russia. But Russia also does, and I think it's important to note, Russia's current government, and I think we're going to see this probably from here on end with Russia, regardless of whoever takes the helm. I don't think we're going to see any destabilizing situation here. Russia does side with the Palestinians on their rights and on statehood, and when it comes to the UN resolutions that call for that. So Russia does stand on that side and does attempt to put that into practice. Whether we believe that's good enough or not is another conversation. But at the same time, I think that the material reality makes it so it has to be. And I think a similar thing with China. A lot of people, because China is a socialist country still, and it does have, even maybe more so, a reason to have solidarity with the Palestinian people, that why doesn't it cut off all its ties with Israel and push the Palestinian cause? Well, I think some of the same issues of why Russia can't really do that or doesn't do that exist. One is that, you touch Israel a certain way on the Israel question, and then you have the entire Western world wanting to punish you for it. But also, I think that there is this reality that where countries that are already established with their sovereignty go depends on the success of the resistance there. So the reason why China and Russia are able to play more positive roles in West Asia in general is because there has been real progress made with regard to the failures of U.S. policy in that region. That Syria was able to beat back the attempt to overthrow it. Iran has been able to prevent its own destabilization vis-a-vis U.S. policy. Hezbollah is more powerful than ever before. Of course, you have Yemen that we spoke about. You have forces that are growing more and more in terms of their ability to shape outcomes. And with that, Russia and China get more opportunities. But the era where we see, like during the mid-20th century, the unconditional solidarity for the Palestinian cause or an anti-colonial cause in general, that is not going to accelerate until especially with countries that are established and have to defend their own sovereignty and have to think about how instability and how conflict with the United States and with NATO will affect them. Until these movements like the Palestinian cause strengthen, and we are seeing that, but until they strengthen themselves and until the region is able to do for itself what is required, it's going to be very hard for a country like Russia and China to try to intervene in a way that respects their own foreign policy of non-interference. Like to think that it would be in China's or Russia's best interest to start arming the Palestinian cause or start to go after Israel economically directly through some kind of state policy, government policy, I think would be very adventurous and ultra leftist. It would be to negate reality, which is the real problems are that we cannot trust the United States and its vassals to act rationally in any way. They will torpedo any semblance of stability of their rules-based order in order to prevent a China and a Russia from playing an assertive role in a conflict like this. The minute China and Russia does that, that's the minute that there will legitimately be a potential nuclear conflict, because the United States sees West Asia still as its territory. So it's a delicate thing, and China and Russia have determined, especially China, but Russia as well, have determined that their best means of helping this process along in a way that serves the Palestinian people, that serves everybody in the region and themselves, is to go through diplomatic means and to ensure through their economic, and I think this is the key thing, especially with China, that people tend to negate, is through their economic activity, they can begin to build bridges that kind of run like dominoes. So dominoes begin to fall when U.S. dependency wanes economically. And we've been seeing that in the region over the course of the last year even, but in the last several years, we've seen China's Syria's admission to the Belt and Road Initiative, China's normalization role in normalizing ties between Saudi Arabia and Iran. We're seeing, the U.S. Desperately trying to make some kind of alternative to the Belt and Road Initiative through the Middle East. That's already been ejected in many ways, the so-called Middle East, Europe, India corridor. That's gone. That's not going to happen anymore. But at the same time, as China and Russia too continue to grow themselves and become more assertive in this region, the hope is that, and I think that there's a reality to this, that these countries and the axis of resistance as a whole have more ability to determine outcomes. And I do think that that's the most favorable way. I actually don't believe that even in the 20th century, right, like the Vietnamese people, while they relied on Soviet Union and Chinese assistance in order to aid their fight against the United States and France before that, I don't think we could say that it was a game changer. I don't think we could say that, well, the Soviet Union was the reason why the Vietnamese people won. No, I don't think we can say that. We can say it was a big help, but at the same time, it would be a mistake it would be Cold War thinking too, to believe that the Soviet Union was like politically able to maneuver those things in a way that that determined outcomes. I don't believe that's true. What is true is that it was in the Soviet Union's best interest to aid the Vietnamese struggle, just like it was China's best interest to aid the Korean struggle. And it wasn't all about ideology. Sure, they believed that self-determination for Vietnamese people and for the DP and for the Korean people was paramount. But guess what? These countries were also right on their borders. The Soviet Union did not want to see East Asia, did not want to see the region, the continent of Asia in general, become some kind of outpost for the U.S. military. It didn't want to see that. China did not want to see the entirety of Korea occupied, so that it had to worry about whether what it did to Korea would happen right over the border, right? Like that, it didn't want that. So I think there's real, also pragmatic and practical concerns that, in the bluster of politics, we all want to see everybody who matters and who has any influence support Palestine without any reservations. But unfortunately, we live in a world where those who actually have power, like the Communist Party of China, like someone like Vladimir Putin, who I would say has a bit more contradictions to him, but those who actually do have power to determine political outcomes are always going to have to factor in the preservation of their own existence, of the stability of their own countries, as well as the fact that you have the United States always ready and willing to escalate things and torpedo. We're seeing it now with the Yemen situation, that there's a lot of room for the United States to act in a very destructive manner. There's very little opportunity, if any at all, for it to act rationally in a way that would maybe avert disasters. So when I look at China and Russia,
That is,
say, well, what else? What do you want? Do you want them to gamble on the United States's potential sanity over supporting the Palestinian cause, or anywhere? People say the same thing about the Philippines. Why doesn't China support certain movements in the Philippines? Well, the U.S. wants to use the Philippines against China, and any move to support any political force in the Philippines would lead the United States to take even more aggressive action. It's not a game, but that really is the terrain that China and that Russia, they have to deal with. And so that plays a huge role. And I do believe there are politics to this too. I do believe that the leadership of China and Russia do truly believe in non-interference. But I think a big reason why non-interference is such a popular foreign policy of both of these countries is because they know better than most what it means to be interfered in, and to then see how massive damage can come from from gambling on the potential sanity and rationality of your so-called adversary. So I think that's where the politics stands there, right? And so it's delicate. It is delicate, and I think the economic relations too. It it would be really interesting to see if China and Russia were to sever relations with Israel because it went too far, so to speak. And we could argue that everything Israel does is already too far. But if that were to ever happen, how would the United States respond to that? I believe that what China is doing now is making it so in the region, for example, if China rebuilds Syria, Israel might have to think twice about bombing Syria, right? Because then you might be bombing Chinese installations. You might be getting into conflict with China over this. And China has a pretty a recent history of the United States meddling in countries in Asia in destroying Chinese built infrastructure. And that's not a good sticking point for China. They don't like that. And they're certainly not friendlier with the United States because of it. So the consequences, right, of economic relations are also very contradictory because Israel also needs Russia. They need China. And so it's going to be very interesting nonetheless. But in my estimation, I think we're going to have to see a strengthening of the resistance, and we all have a role to play in that for the world situation to play out more favorably for the Palestinian cause. And hopefully that is what occurs.
All right, I think we're going to close. I don't have anything written on my notes there. I think I covered everything. This has been great, Danny. I think it's been over a year. Has it been over a year since you've maybe close to it? Maybe it hasn't been quite a year since the last time. Yeah, it's been a long time since like when we first started doing Nick and CJ. That's the last time we had you on. So it's been a while, but happy to see you're back. Love to see everybody's channel taking off. So love to see that with your channel. But do you want to shout out anything before we adjourn here? You want to shout out your channel, shout out when your next stream is, your next guest, or anything?
Yeah, sure.
You want to shout out and we can read super chats and get out of here.
Sure. Well, thank you. This was great. Yeah, it's been quite a busy year. So yeah, you can find me. Just find me on YouTube as well. Danny Haiphong, my name. Yeah, my next stream I believe will be Thursday. I might have 2 on Thursday. It's going to be kind of brutal. I believe Pepe Escobar will be coming on Thursday morning, and then I was going to do this like former Intel panel with like Scott Ritter, Ray McGovern, and Larry Johnson. I believe never had him on, but I know they kind of run as a threesome, so to speak. In many respects. So that will happen at night. Thursday night.
I'm assuming Larry Johnson is not the basketball player, Larry Johnson.
No, that's what I always thought. No, he's a former analyst as well. I don't know. He talks about foreign policy.
Right on.
But no, one of my favorite basketball players from back in the days, actually. I mean, yeah, we can get deep into that. But
so you have those three. Is your next guest? You have the trifecta.
Yeah. So I'll have that at night, and then that morning, Pepe Escobar. So I'll be on Thursday. So subscribe to the channel. You can find me there. You can find all the ways to support me, and to that's basically where I'm doing most of my work now. That's where I have the time to put in. So yeah. So thank you though. I appreciate it. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, people loved it. So they love when they have you on. So it was great, Danny. Anything, Nick, you want to say before I put Danny in the back? Anything else you want to say to Danny before I put him in the back?
I got nothing, man. Good to have you on, Danny, as always. We can go on foreign policy all night, so always good to have you on, man.
Yeah, that's one thing we could do all night. All right, Danny, I'm gonna put you in the back. Thank you so much again. Hopefully, it won't be another year before we have you on. Hopefully not. No. So, all right, sir. Nick, I know you look a little sluggish. You want me to read the super chats and let you go?
Yeah,
I can do that.
I'm tired as hell.
Because I know you
way later over here than over there.
Yeah, you go all the way through dinner, and I'm ending right when my dinner is about to start. So I'm not feeling the hunger right now like you are. So I can read the super chat.
Yeah, I'm tired.
Yeah, I can read the super chat.
We long streams be killing me, man. But I see you guys.
Yeah, for sure. We put in work on these streams, so hopefully you guys appreciate some of the work that we're doing here. But let me read some of the super chats. I'm not sure if I'm gonna go live tomorrow. There's a ton of stories, but I'm just trying to pace myself and not do as much content, be in the real world a little bit more often. So that's what I'm attempting to do. We'll see how it works out. But here is the super chats. I'll start from the bottom. It's the only way I know if I cover everything. I've been having discussions about Israel Gaza on TikTok and how it's opening the eyes of people to the genocide going on in Africa because of neoliberal capitalism, quests for infinite growth like Congo and Sudan. That is a spot on super chat. Thank you for the super chat. That is ARJ 1997. But so Israel is not the only place that the genocide is happening to Congo also. This is Amanda Brinkley. Thank you for the super chat. Biden is despicable. Biden does not want peace. And what I prefer, that's a better way. What I prefer over Trump, what I prefer in Trump over Biden is just that even if you don't like it, he's going to tell you up front. I prefer a person who even tell me I hate you. I'm a KKK member. I hate black people. I rather that than you pretend like you like me and you're one of those. So, it feels like that's what Biden is doing with Israel. Feels like he's saying, humanitarian pause, humanitarian hostages out. But then in the background, he's sending them weapons and giving them more money, going around Congress to get weapons to him. So it just feels like that's the vibe I get from Joe Biden right now. Great discussion. That is Barbara P. Thank you for the super chat. Danny RG. I think that's a super sticker. Or is that a thumbs up? Super sticker. And this one here, I believe you read it, but I'll read it again. Thank you for this super chat. This is a large amount, so really appreciate it. Make sure you show some love to Awa Libi Binu. I appreciate work you guys put out. Thank you, and thank you so much for the super chat. Very generous of you. And this one, if NATO wanted peace, they would have let the Russian Federation join NATO when they tried to in the 90s and again in the 2000s. Yes. And if you didn't know that, some people may not have known that, but this is from Back from the Road. Yes, Russia tried to or requested to join NATO a couple of times. The one I remember most and have to know the most details from is the one in the 90s when they wanted to join NATO. So if NATO was interested in peace, if NATO was created to fight against the Soviet Union and or Russia, and then that country wants to join you, isn't that a win for what we're trying to do? I would consider that to be a win, but apparently the United States did not. Here, Geo, thank you for super chat. Shout out to all the workers watching while on the job, and that is absolutely true. Shout out to all the workers. This one from Patrick. If Trump's the victim, it could drain 3 third-party votes, establishment playing 3D chess. If Trump's the victim, it could drain 30-party votes. If he's the nominee, I guess, I could. I don't know. No, if Trump is the victim. And I'm trying to just basically see if what my stance is on that. I guess I would have to think about it more. But thank you, Patrick, for that super chat. I think we might be getting into some that we may have read, but let's see. Nick is a snickler that Sugar Ray Leonard with the surprise breaking stories. I'm loving every minute of the clown show. Popcorn is ready. Thank you for that. That's 007 Angelo. That super chat. About in 71. Always showing love. Super sticker. Name that taco. Got 4 more months of membership. I need to see y'all watch that Alex Jones clip. I remember you posting that before we actually watched it, because we did watch it. And we got No new super chats, so I think that's it. I'm closing out the show today. Make sure you hit that like button on your way out. And let's see here. I think I had a video that I was not able to get to. Was there a video I was not able to get to? I'm probably gonna revisit the story Young Voters because we didn't get a chance to watch all of the Morning Joe clip. I'm gonna leave you here with Kim Iverson. She's critiquing RFK Jr. and as she's watching the interview with ambulance is going by, if you can hear him. Let them go before I continue to talk. This interview where Robert F. Kennedy Jr. went on Breaking Points and had an interview / debate about Palestine and Israel, and where he said he called Palestinians the most pampered in the world. And she's make this video on it. Here's Kim Iverson critiquing RFK Jr.
You got to pin people on what do they think the solution should be rather than, yeah, they started it. Oh, yeah, but they started it. Yeah, but they started it. It's just an unproductive conversation. What is your solution, Bobby? What do you think should happen to the Palestinian people? Okay, let's just say you're right. And they are completely to blame for everything that's ever happened to them. Let's say they have rejected every peace agreement. They've squandered all their money. Their leaders are rich because they continue squandering the cash that's been donated to them. Let's say they are the most pampered group of people in regards to how much international money they've received over the years. Let's just say you are right on all of these points. But then what? So does that mean it's okay and it's justifiable to massacre all of these thousands of children? Is that what that means? Does it mean that this is then justifiable to expel them into Egypt or into Jordan or into Lebanon? Is that what you're saying? So even if you're right, so what? What do you do with this group of people? Did they just bring it upon themselves and they all should die and oh well? Because I'm pretty sure that exact rhetoric was used with another group who said, those people will not assimilate. Those people they brought war to us. They forced us to lose World War I. They're conniving. They're stabbing us in the back. They're not assimilating. They're not really one of us, and we need to get rid of them. Because it sounds a lot like that. They brought it upon themselves. And there were a lot of people who believed that. Obviously, at the time. Otherwise, the Nazis would not have had that much support. But they did get all that support because they were using arguments that resonated with people that people felt like, yeah, that makes sense to me. These people were not evil people. They were people who were worried about their country. They were worried about their safety, just like the Israelis are. And they used arguments and they soaked up those arguments. They believed those arguments because it felt good to them to just say, the only thing we can do is just get rid of the threat entirely, get rid of them somehow. And if the other countries won't take them, then I guess you just have to kill them. That is kind of what Israel's saying and doing, right? They're saying, well, if these people won't be taken by Egypt or Jordan or Lebanon, we're just going to be bombing them until these other countries feel so bad they finally take these people. And when it becomes such a humanitarian crisis that it becomes just, they must be taken because it's such a horrid situation for them. But who's doing the horrid killing? Who's the one that's actually creating that situation? It's Israel. So really, again, the conversations, we can go around in circles all day long on who did what to who. Even if you were back in the 40s and 30s and you believed all the propaganda against the Jewish people and you just bought it hook, line, and sinker. They were at fault for World War I. They were not able to assimilate. They were backstabbers. They were a security threat. Even if you believed all of that, then what is your solution? What do you think should have been done? Do you then agree with the final solution? Would you say, well, yeah, that was the way to go? No. People today, maybe at that time they would have, it's hard to imagine, but today, of course, we would say, no, absolutely not. That was not the right solution. And yet, that argument is being used today. It's, of course, sugar-coated differently. It's painted with a different brush. And so people don't realize that it's very similar. But it is ultimately when you say, well, you know, we offered them all these things and they just wouldn't take it. So what else can we do? Well, I would like to know, what is it you think you should do? And get them to say it out loud, because that's the thing. They're not willing to say it out loud. They're willing to hem and haw and insinuate it by asking you instead, well, what would you do? Oh, so we can say, you know, we believe you're committing ethnic cleansing. We believe that this is a catastrophe, even a genocide. We believe that's what you're doing. And if your response to me from that accusation isn't, no, I'm not, because here's why, and this is what we're really doing, and this is what's going to happen when it's all over. If your response is instead, well, what would you do? Maybe take a hard look at everything. I think that would be a hard look at the response, a hard look at the answers.